Chapter 4277. The sun was shining brightly outside, but the warehouse was pitch black. The map of the city was spread out on the ground. Li Jinyin held the flashlight in his hand, and his slender fingers gently stroked the map. His cold voice was clearly heard by his team members. Our position is here, and the peacekeeping camp is here. The straight line distance is 16 kilometers, and the detour is 24 kilometers. Now that the peacekeeping camp is on red alert, a battle may break out at any time. I plan to walk in a straight line and pass through this crossfire point. The importance of the special material made Li Jinyin realize that they had to race against time. The material was less than 50 kilograms, but it was the key to the progress of the entire project. If the material was not there, the entire project would stagnate, and the consequence of stagnation would be the backwardness of the country's weapons. The consequences would directly affect the strength of the country. Therefore, they had to race against time. 24 kilometers was shortened to 16 kilometers. A full 8 kilometers was shortened, and so was the time needed. Yi Qian's gaze stopped at the crossfire point. After a glance, she said to the communications soldier, Dasha, "Let me see the satellite map. I passed by here last night." She had taken a ride here last night. Hiding in the chassis, she saw a fallen road sign. The headlights of the car behind swept past, and she vaguely saw the name of the street on the road sign. She needed to reconfirm it. The military portable device pulled up the satellite map of Yeni City. This was the satellite map before the war. After the war, the satellite map was devastated, and it was difficult to distinguish which was which. Dasha quickly found the location they were going to pass through, and the cross-shaped needle pointed to the name of the location. Yi Qian took a closer look, and a smile appeared in her dark eyes, washed by the flames of war. "We can pass through here, and it's very safe." She placed the portable device in the middle, and the whole screen opened directly to zoom in on the specific location of the map. Although this street was bombed and is very close to the crossfire point, here, her slender fingers pointed to a pre-war building. The shell directly blew through here. We can pass through the entire building. The crossfire point is on our left, and we can use the building's wall as cover. We can directly reach Saya Street. If the route through the building is destroyed, then we can immediately withdraw, and from here, her slender and fair finger pointed at the street, not far from the building. We can also retreat from here and here. We can also avoid the crossfire and have more options. Passing through Saya Street is Bluebell's Park. Beyond Bluebell's Park is the outskirts of Yeni City, which is not far from our camp. More importantly, the illegal militants have surrounded our camp. If we really want to fight, we can kill them from behind and directly clear a path of blood. We can also get the soldiers in the camp to deliver the materials, and we can leave immediately. The timing is seamless. We can leave after the battle. Of course, if the camp is in a state of emergency, we can continue to stay after the battle until they retreat. Yi Qian was a commander to begin with. Her arrangements were based on the overall situation, and then she would be able to command the battle from all directions. With a cause, there would be a process. Throughout the process, every move would be considered one by one, and then the results, as well as the follow-up. As she spoke, Li Jinyin looked at the satellite map and combined it with the military map in his mind. He nodded and said, "Okay, we'll evacuate according to your plan." Chapter 4278. All the members of the Storm Commandos nodded. They didn't raise any objections to Qing Niao's plan and didn't express any doubt throughout the whole process. Yang Heng, who had been watching silently, was stunned again. This was because he found that Yi Qian's words carried a lot of weight in this group of special forces. He could see the respect they had for Yi Qian from their eyes. In other words, Yi Qian had worked with him more than once. His ability was so outstanding that these special forces admired him very much. All of a sudden, Yang Heng had an illusion that the Yi Qian he knew and the Yi Qian in front of him were actually two different people. He had thought that the Yi Qian he knew was powerful enough. Now he realized that the Yi Qian he knew was far less powerful than the Yi Qian he knew now. He needed to get to know Yi Qian all over again. His understanding of her was not even the tip of the iceberg. Yang Hung couldn't help but think of his cousin, Song Jiqiu. Last time, when he had gone to the National Science and Technology University of Science and Technology, he had talked with his cousin while walking on campus. Song Jiqiu had mentioned Yi Qian and said something that had touched him deeply at that time. He had asked his cousin how he got along with Yi Qian at that time. Song Jiqiu had said, "The power of a role model is that there is no pressure, only hard work. Knowing that you have such a powerful peer and still working so hard, you will feel ashamed of wasting your time. You will feel guilty for wasting even a second." He had also mentioned that under the influence of Yi Qian, none of the 45 students in their class had slacked off for a moment. When it was time to play, they would play appropriately, but their studies and training would never be delayed. The power of a role model, Yi Qian, who could make an arrogant boy like his cousin submit to him, was indeed not even the tip of the iceberg. Although it was not, it was already shocking enough. Unknowingly, Yi Qian had gone further and further. The things that he had come into contact with and seen were far beyond his peers. He even dared to say that none of her classmates in middle school and high school had achieved what she had achieved today. In less than 3 or 4 years, Yi Qian had already far surpassed her former classmates who had started at the same level as her. Then, in a few years' time, how high would she reach? With this thought, Yang Heng's expression turned solemn. She was so focused on comparing other people with Yi Qian that she forgot about herself. To put it nicely, he was now a returnee who had returned from studying abroad. In reality, it was because his family felt that he was still young and could train in the army to suppress his impulsiveness before starting his own business. Now, he needed to properly plan himself. If this continued, the gap between him and Yi Qian would widen. Even the gap between him and his cousin would widen. No wonder his family said that his cousin seemed to have been reborn ever since he got into the military academy. Now, he finally knew why. Yi Qian, everything was because of her influence. In just a few minutes, Yang Hung felt as if he had been enlightened. In an instant, he had walked out of the maze. Even a look in his eyes had changed. Yang Hung was shocked. His senior, who also knew Yi Qian, was also shocked. She could even lead a group of Special Forces soldiers in a battle. Junior Yi Qian, you're so amazing that your classmates probably don't know about it. Your instructor probably doesn't know about it. Your brigade leader probably doesn't know about it. The higher-ups probably don't know about it either. The senior pushed up his glasses and felt an inexplicable sense of joy. His seniors did not suddenly become enlightened like Yang Hung. They were in different fields and had different directions for development. They also had very clear plans for their own futures, unlike Yang Hung, who was somewhat vague about his future plans. Therefore, they were not affected by it and only felt honored. Chapter 4279. On the other hand, Commissioner Miao was very pleased to see the outstanding performance of the female students from his school. Not bad, not bad. They were good seedlings for military operations. Although he did not know how to command battles, to be able to get the approval of the captain of the Special Forces meant that they were really amazing. A strong country with strong technology and a strong army. He saw the future in this group of young people. He saw a strong army and a strong country in the future. The current generation of young people should be like this group of young people in front of him. They should not treat their youth as a fleeting moment. They should not look back when they were old and realize that they had achieved nothing other than living well. Since they were here, they should leave something for this world. They should not live in vain. Yi Qian did not know what Commissioner Miao, Yang Hung, and his seniors were thinking. After the retreat route was set, they immediately began to leave the warehouse. The 5 people who were rescued were each protected by 5 members. Yi Qian covered Yang Hung. Commissioner Miao was protected by De Xiao. The other 3 seniors were protected by De Eel, De Whale, and De Squiddo. This time, even Commissioner Miao had a gun in his hand. It was not a rifle, but a pistol for self-defense in times of danger. Of course, the water demons of the Storm Commandos did not wish for this to happen. Retreat. Following Demon King Li's order, 3 commandos took over the position of the 4 sentries outside and began to cover the retreat. In the middle were Yi Qian and the other 4. The last water demons to retreat cleaned up the traces left behind when they retreated. When they left, it was as if no one had ever been in the warehouse. When they came out of the warehouse and looked towards the horizon, they could see grayish-green smoke rising from the city. The sound of artillery fire and gunfire could still be heard. The battle had started at 4 in the morning, and there was no sign of it stopping at 7:30. The water demons of the Storm Commandos did not have time to care about the situation of the two sides. Although the redrawn retreat route was half an hour earlier than the original plan, no one dared to let down their guard. Their eyes were on the 6 directions, their ears were on the alert, and their muscles were ready for battle at any time. They bathed in the sunlight and began to pass through the smoke. Unyielding city in the daytime was much more dangerous than at night. Passing through the ruins of the city that had been ravaged by the flames of war, even if they took a second look, they would feel that there was a gun aiming at them in the places where the sunlight could not reach. Danger, darkness, and sorrow. This was Unyielding city in the daytime. The illegal armed men drove tanks through the heavily damaged streets. Hiding in the corners of the abandoned walls where the smell of smoke could still be smelled, they stared at the tanks that drove past them with vigilance. It was not until the ground could no longer feel the tremors caused by the chains of the tanks running over them that the hidden water ghosts slowly walked out. Go! With a low shout, countless figures rushed out from the ruins on both sides of the street and continued to evacuate. They could not directly pass through the streets because this was still the territory of the illegal armed forces. There were even more illegal armed forces stationed outside to defend against the government forces. They could not show themselves and could only carefully pass through the ruins. Yang Heng followed Yi Jian closely. Whatever she did, he would do the same. He followed her like a parrot and never acted recklessly. At this time, he would listen to Yi Jian's arrangements. The closer they got to the crossfire, the clearer the gunshots became. Yang Heng could not help but tighten his grip on the rifle in his hand. He was the only one with a rifle among the 5. Don't be afraid. Follow me. A cold and calm voice sounded. Just a few words had already exposed the uneasiness in his heart. He looked up and saw Yi Jian, who had been protecting him all this while slightly arched her back, protecting him behind her like a shield. Her back was clearly slender, but it made him feel inexplicably at ease. Chapter 4280. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yang Heng couldn't help but reply, "I'm not scared. I'm just a little nervous." He replied in a low voice, trying his best to sound relaxed. Yi Jian couldn't help but chuckle when he heard that. He didn't point it out. Scout C Anemone reported excitedly, "Devil King, we can pass." When the news came, everyone's spirits were lifted. Keep up, keep up. Pay attention to the rear. Okay, assault team, get ready. Retreat. Through the earpiece, the team members whispered to each other. The water demons of the Storm Commandos, who were fighting overseas for the first time, passed through the battlefield and headed toward the peacekeeping camp. The artillery fire on the left side was extremely intense. No one knew which side fired a shell, but the explosion shook Yi Jian's side. They had already entered the place where the illegal militants' forces were the most concentrated. The first to enter were the 2 scouts, Sea Anemone and Seaweed. Now, they were hiding in the building that they were about to pass and waiting for everyone to pass. On the dilapidated street, the illegal militants stared straight ahead. As long as there were government troops in front of them, they would immediately open fire until no one dared to approach. The water demons of the Storm Commandos stealthily passed through the group of buildings bit by bit, almost right under the enemy's nose. The whole process was very, very slow. They would hide for a while, and then move again. When they reached the building that they were about to pass through, everyone, including Yi Jian and Li Jinyan, were sweating profusely. This was the rear camp of the illegal militants. As they were guarding the front, they didn't pay much attention to the rear. That was why they gave the water demons a chance to sneak through slowly. The rear was guarded by the rebel general, Alva. No wonder these people were so relaxed. At this moment, they held their breaths. They gently exhaled, then slowly inhaled. The smoke in the air entered their lungs, and they had to endure it no matter how much it choked their throats. Step on my shoulders and climb over. When they came to the bottom of a broken wall that had been swept by artillery shells and bullets, Yi Qian supported himself with one hand on the wall and bent his back. He said to Yang Heng beside him, "Go over quickly." To avoid the illegal armed forces that could start a war with the government forces at any time, they chose to move forward through the ruins. Now that they had reached a building where they had to climb over the broken walls, the water ghosts and Yi Qian could easily climb over, but Yang Heng, Commissioner Miao, and the three senior brothers could not. Left with no other choice, Yang Heng gritted his teeth and finally took a step forward. He had no other choice, and time did not allow him to make a choice. He could only step on her shoulders to climb up. Just as Yang Heng climbed up the wall, before he was ready to jump down, his leg was grabbed by someone, and he instantly flipped down from the 6-meter-high wall. He had to bite his tongue to prevent himself from screaming. At this moment, Yi Qian had already hidden himself. Big Eel, who was guarding the surroundings, alerted them that there were people, and the water ghosts who had not yet passed by quickly hid themselves. Yi Qian's entire body tensed up as he listened to the sound of footsteps. Even his heartbeat became lighter, and he did not dare to beat too fast. This time, the movement was a little loud. Big Eel, who was in charge of guarding the area, cursed under his breath. He probably had something else to say, but he suddenly stopped, cleared his throat, and said, "A few guys have come in. We have to kill them. Qing Yao, the people around you have passed by, so we have to go over and take care of them. They are now sneaking their way over here." Just as he finished speaking, Big Eel's voice suddenly tensed up. "Damn it, they are preparing to lay down mines. I'm afraid the government forces are going to attack here." After he finished speaking, Sea Anemone, who was guarding the area in front of them, said sternly, "Damn it, hurry up and retreat. The government forces are mobile, and they're about 1 kilometer away from us. I'm afraid this will be their next crossfire." Chapter 4281. This was no F***king joke. Yi Qian couldn't wait any longer. She pressed down on her earpiece and said softly, "Big Eel, be my eyes. I'll take care of Bray. 5 in total. Damn it, you can't do it alone. Demon King, support Qing Miao. I'll be your eyes." Commissioner Miao was the first to jump over the wall, and Yang Heng was the second. There were still 3 professors who hadn't reached in time. The water demon protecting them couldn't leave, so the Demon King in charge of bringing up the rear took over. After Big Eel finished speaking, Li Jinyan had already moved and was quickly approaching Yi Qian. "Qing Yao, left side for 0 o'clock. Ready. Demon King, right side, 9 o'clock. Ready. Damn it, they're probably going to blow this place up. Cut off the government army's entrance here," Big Eel said fiercely. Once the entrance to the government army was blown up, not only would they have to take a detour, but they would also be caught in the crossfire and lose their lives at any time. Before the operation, they were already prepared to sacrifice themselves. Soldiers, going to the battlefield was like going to a tiger's den. Even if they knew there were tigers on a mountain, they would still go to the tiger's den. If they really died, they would have no regrets. But Commissioner Miao and the others couldn't. They had to protect Commissioner Miao and the others. Yang Heng had already realized that something was wrong. He wanted to ask the Special Forces soldier beside him if something had happened, but the other party had already said, "Translator, no matter what happens later, you have to stay with Commissioner Miao. We're going out, so take good care of Commissioner Miao. Even though you're a civilian, I believe you can do it. Just like how you stood up to face the illegal militants," Big Eel said softly. His arm muscles were tense because of the sudden incident, and even the lines on his face were as sharp as a knife. Yang Heng pursed his lips and then nodded heavily. Definitely. He was a civilian, but he was also a soldier. Before coming to Libya, he had already told the political commissar that he wouldn't regret coming. He wouldn't regret coming. If he really died, he would still be a martyr. The People's Hero Memorial Tablet would also have a wisp of his heroic soul imprinted on it. Yi Jian had already taken action. Crouching, she rushed out like a cannonball before the other party could get close to her. With the boom of gunfire not far from her left as a cover, she pinned down the illegal armed man who had not started laying mines and had all the tools in his hands. Then, she raised her combat dagger and slashed down. PFFF, blood gushed out like rain, splattering onto the ash-colored gravel. Specks of blood blossomed, dark red in color. Li Jinyan eliminated a target at the same speed as he took down the person and dragged him away. 3 more to go. The government troops were getting closer and closer. High Anemone's face was dripping with sweat. "Brothers, let's try our best to get through. Hi Zao, come and help Commissioner Meow and the interpreter. I'll send them over now." Big Eel took over and brought Commissioner Meow and Yang Hung closer. If something really happened, he would definitely stay and fight side by side with Captain Demon King. The 2 scouts immediately understood what the Great Mermaid meant. They held the anti-tank mines in their hands. Currently, landmines were banned internationally to prevent them from harming civilians. However, there were still more than 10 countries that had not signed this agreement. Libya, however, had signed it. The illegal militants who did not follow the rules in the first place continued to use them. This was because the Chinese peacekeeping forces were also responsible for demoning, especially the places where the illegal militants had stayed. They had to demine countless times to ensure that there were no problems. Internationally banned high-risk mines were still used by the illegal militants. This was also why Big Eel was instantly enraged when he saw it. Chapter 4282. Laying mines was absolutely not allowed, even if they were on Libyan soil. Even if the person who discovered the crime was a Chinese soldier, out of humanity and responsibility, they had to stop it. Out of the 5, 2 had been taken care of. There were still 3 to be dealt with. There are still 3 left. Qing Yao, find a place to hide. The target is coming. Big Eel's voice was so tense that it sounded like a straight line. He was very worried about his comrades. Sudden situations could easily expose their identities. Yi Qian exhaled softly. He placed the combat dagger in his hand horizontally and pressed it against his wrist. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he slowly squatted beside a piece of exposed steel reinforced wall. This could not even be considered a wall. It was just a piece of wall that had been peeled off by artillery fire. It was about 20 centimeters thick, barely enough for Yi Qian to hide. Where are they? Enoch Nigel. The owner of the footsteps shouted loudly when he realized that his comrades who had entered the minefield earlier than him had disappeared. This was a place that they had occupied. Therefore, they were very vigilant and did not realize that there was danger around them. His shout was heard by the other 2 illegal militants. They were originally near Li Jinyan's side. Now that they heard the shout, they headed towards Yi Qian's side. Sweat soaked into Big Eel's eyes. The sun was getting hotter and hotter. His combat uniform was soaked in sweat and stuck to his skin. The heat was like a roasting fire. His Adam's apple was moving. His voice was so tense that it could break at any time. Qing Yao, there are 2 people approaching from behind. The target on the side was originally to be taken care of. Now there were more people coming from behind. Yi Qian was about to be exposed. Big Eel's voice made everyone's breathing quicken. Big Eel's grip on Commissioner Meow's wrist suddenly tightened. His cheeks were as hard as rocks. The water ghosts all knew that. Qing Yao was about to be exposed. Big Eel did not slow down. What he needed to do now was to escort Commissioner Meow and the translator Yang Hung away. He needed the seaweed to cover their escape. Soon, they would be able to leave very soon. He could already see the entrance of the building that had been blasted by artillery shells. There was plenty of sunlight at the entrance. That was the hope of leaving alive. And behind him, his comrades were in danger. The abyss was already staring at her, or perhaps waiting for her to jump into the abyss. Yi Qian, who was prepared to be exposed, adjusted his breathing once again. His elder brother's cold voice came through the earpiece. "I'm behind you. I'm here." Li Jinyan, who was a little far away, had already rushed over. One of the water ghosts who were protecting the 3 senior brothers took action. The Big Eel, who was watching closely, told him to support Qing Yao. The 3 armed men formed a triangle, and Yi Qian was hiding in the middle of the triangle. Yi Qian, who was in danger, pursed her lips. She knew that she could be exposed at any time, but there was no fear on her face. Listening to the voices of her comrades in the headset, she remained motionless and kept her eyes fixed on her initial target. In her heart, She calculated the distance and when she should make her move. As for the rear, she believed in her brother and her comrades. There was no need to be afraid. There was no need to panic. She just had to face it calmly. Big Eel, who was acting as the eyes, saw the Demon King approaching quickly. He saw his comrade, Big Prawn, rushing over to support Ching Yao, who was in danger. His eyes, which were red from sweat, stared even more intently. He did not even dare to blink, afraid that he would miss the most important information if he blinked. He had to watch closely and become the eyes of his comrades. Big Prawn, 2 meters to the left. 4 meters to the third target. Demon King, continue forward. 5 meters to the second target. Ching Yao, they are less than 3 meters away. Chapter 4283. Yi Qian didn't say anything. She tapped her microphone to indicate that she was aware of the situation. The air seemed to have turned heavy. As the footsteps got closer, Yi Qian's gaze turned colder. Just a little longer. Just a little longer, and I'll be able to make my move. 1, 2, 3. The figure of the approaching figure had already shrouded Yi Qian. He seemed to have noticed someone lying on the ground below the broken wall. His footsteps paused for a few seconds. The sunlight was too glaring. The blade of the combat dagger slashed across, and a blinding light suddenly shot out from the mirror-like surface of the sun. The light flashed past, and the scorching air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. Yi Qian panted and stabbed his dagger into his target's neck. Ugh, ugh. The man's throat was bubbling with water. His legs kept kicking, and the gravel rubbed against the ground, creating a loud, clattering sound. The dagger that was stuck in his neck turned half a circle, and the sharp blade cut through his throat, trachea, and esophagus. The footsteps behind him were hurried. Yi Qian didn't even pull out his dagger. He threw himself forward, and his cat-like figure darted into a corner where the sunlight couldn't reach. She didn't have time to deal with the target that had already been taken care of. She only had time to finish him off. Blood flowed down the broken rocks that had turned white from the sun's rays. It added a layer of color to the exposed brown bricks. The 2 illegal militants who ran over discovered their comrade on the ground and saw the thing stuck in his neck. They were shocked, but they reacted quickly. They raised the rifles in their hands to the sky and prepared to fire to alert their comrades nearby. 2 black figures rushed out, and like bullets fired from a gun barrel, they hit their targets accurately. Li Jingyan and Dasha each subdued one of them. Retreat. Big Eel, who was acting as their eyes, finally had the time to raise his hand to wipe away his sweat. The 3 senior brothers who were listening to the commotion didn't wait for their junior sister to wake up. With the help of 2 male Special Forces soldiers, they climbed over the 6-meter-tall wall. There were water ghosts waiting for them behind the wall. When he jumped down, a senior brother's glasses fell off with a paw sound, and the lens of his left eye shattered on the spot. Yi Qian, who had retrieved her combat dagger, dashed over. She drew her dagger quickly and fiercely. The enemy's blood splattered on her body and face. She ran over with a murderous aura and stepped on the back of her bent comrade as fast as she could. With a leap and a kick, she grabbed onto the broken wall tightly with both hands. It took her less than 5 seconds to reach the top of the wall. Come up. Clinging to the top of the wall, Yi Qian reached out his hand to his comrades below. With another run up, he pushed himself up the wall. A pair of tanned and strong hands grabbed Yi Qian's hand and borrowed Yi Qian's strength to climb over the wall. We'll do it. You go down and protect them. The water ghosts who were protecting the 3 senior brothers had already come up. Only the Devil King and Dasha hadn't arrived yet. Yi Qian didn't decline. She said, "Okay," and quickly climbed over the wall. Then, like a swallow, she jumped down from the 6-meter-tall wall. Her feet touched the ground, and there was only a thin layer of dust. Then, after 2 consecutive flips, her figure was nowhere to be seen. The 2 senior brothers who were watching nervously, this is the legendary Qin Gong, right? Jumping down from 6-meter-tall was so easy. It was like jumping for fun. After Yi Qian jumped down, she even helped one of the senior brothers pick up his glasses. Li Jingyan was the last to jump over. Big Eel retreat. Following Li Jinyan's order, Big Eel, who was observing from a high vantage point, also retreated. Chapter 4284. Following Big Eel's retreat, everyone finally relaxed. Although Commissioner Meow and the others did not know what had happened, they understood why they had to retreat in such a hurry. Seeing Yi Qian coming over, Commissioner Meow gently closed his eyes, feeling as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart. Yang Heng's tense back also relaxed. He held onto a dusty wall with one hand and remained silent for a while before he could take a steady step forward. Qing Miao, Yi Qian, even high-fived a few of his comrades to congratulate them. Just now, they had really escaped death. If they had fired a warning shot, everyone would have been in danger. Even if they wanted to escape, they would not be able to. Their battle uniforms were drenched in sweat, and water seemed to drip from them as they walked. They looked at their comrades who were slightly injured but were still alive, and they smiled at each other. Their dark faces contrasted with their snow-white teeth, making their smiles as bright as the sun. Not bad. Qing Yao very steady. Big Mermaid approached Yi Qian and whispered with a smile, "You really don't want to consider joining our team? If you join us, you'll be our team's treasure." Team treasure, or even national treasure. Yi Qian did not answer. He only smiled at Big Mermaid. After so long, she still did not forget to poach him. The government troops had already gathered and launched a new round of attacks on the illegal militants. Artillery fire filled the sky, and smoke billowed. Yi Qian and his group of 20 people were struggling to move forward. If they were not careful, they would fall into the abyss and lose their lives. They had entered the most dangerous moment. No one said anything more. Cover, retreat, hide. These are the words they talked about the most along the way. Commissioner Meow and the 3 students were not taken care of by the Special Forces soldiers who rescued them. At this time, it was best to take care of themselves and not cause trouble for them. As for Yang Heng, he had taken on some responsibility from the moment he held the rifle. He felt that he had to shoulder it. After all, he was a soldier. Even if his position was a civilian, he was still a soldier. He did not follow the other water ghosts. He only followed Yi Qian and followed him closely. Whatever Yi Qian told him to do, he would do it immediately. At this moment, his friends who had once been sitting at the same table as him became his protective umbrella. They protected him all the way back to the campsite. After passing through the bumpy Saya Street, and then passing through the Bluebells Park, which had been damaged by artillery fire, the scenery was gone, revealing the dark brown soil everywhere. Behind them, artillery fire filled the sky, and the government troops sent out tanks. From the fact that the illegal militants had deployed anti-tank mines in advance, it could be seen that there were still people like the rebel Arwa in the government army. The king of land warfare, tanks, fired directly. The strong fire attack instantly destroyed the illegal militants' fortifications. In order to annihilate the illegal militants in the city of Yini, the strong fire attack tanks also increased the support firepower. They were equipped with short 76mm howitzers. When the howitzers were fired, the buildings that were hit collapsed. Countless illegal militants were directly blown to pieces by the artillery fire. Broken limbs and bodies were scattered all around. Blood was instantly scorched into a dark brown color by the heat of the cannon fire. The lucky survivors dragged their broken bodies and screamed in pain. One of the illegal militants' body was directly blown into 2. He didn't die immediately. Instead, he watched as his lower body was blown away. He just stared with his eyes wide open and died in pain. This place had become hell on earth. I need backup. Now I need backup. They have already concentrated their firepower on the attack. The heavy weapons I brought out can't meet the needs at all. Chapter 4285. Inside the train station, the rebel General Alva was yelling at the top of his lungs. The situation at the front was dire. The government troops had mobilized their forces to launch a direct assault. He had a feeling that he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Soon, news of an even more tragic battle spread. Saya Street had fallen. Tanks had passed through the buildings, and the howitzers had left bloody gashes. Where are the mines? Damn it! Where do they plant the mines? Alva wasn't just roaring. His eyes were ferocious and his neck was swollen. No one knew why the anti-tank mines didn't detonate. No one knew that the 5 people who planted the mines had been secretly killed. The sun was getting brighter. Walking under the sun was like walking into a furnace. Their clothes were wet and dry, leaving white salt stains on them. At this time, Yi Qian and the others had already passed through Bluebell's Park. They were very close to the Chinese peacekeeping camp and had already reached the outskirts of Yeni City. It had been an hour and 15 minutes since they came out of the warehouse. They were 15 minutes ahead of the estimated time. According to the original plan, they would have to walk out of Bluebell's Park within an hour and then rest for 10 minutes. But now, it didn't even have a minute to rest. No one stopped and quickly headed for the Chinese peacekeeping camp. They were about 3 kilometers away from the camp when they heard gunshots. They came from the direction of the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Big Shrimp contacted the camp through the satellite phone. The person on the phone wasn't the platoon leader, but a soldier. The soldier had been holding his gun and waiting for the call. As soon as Li Jingyan's identity was revealed, the soldier immediately reported the current situation at the camp. The camp has been attacked by illegal militants and artillery. 4 peacekeepers have been seriously injured. The camp is in an emergency. This was the latest news that Li Jingyan received from the peacekeeping camp. It was very urgent, and they urgently needed help. When Commissioner Miao learned that the camp had been attacked, he was worried about the soldiers and anxious about the special materials that he had painstakingly refined. He hadn't had a good night's sleep since he was kidnapped, and had been on foot for a long time. At this time, Commissioner Miao's stamina was obviously weak. He even felt that his body temperature was abnormally high. But he didn't say anything. He didn't even let the 3 disciples who were taking care of him say anything. He said softly to Li Jingyan, "We've slowed down your marching speed. We're only 3 kilometers away now. Hurry up. Don't waste any more time because of us. We won't go with you. If we go, we'll just be a burden and distract you. Let's find a place to hide first. We'll come back when it's over." Commissioner Miao was worried about that batch of special materials. Even if he lost his life, he had to protect that batch of materials. Teacher, his decision made the expressions of the 3 PhD students change. The supervisor meant that he would rather sacrifice himself to protect the materials. Yi Qian's eyes darkened as he said in a low voice, "Teacher, we didn't save you to put you in danger again. Your safety is very important. This is our mission in Libya. Therefore, you have to follow us." The marching speed had to be increased, but Commissioner Miao and the others had to be protected. As such, the Storm Commandos were split into 2 groups. 4 water ghosts were left to protect Commissioner Miao, 3 students, and the translator, Yang Heng. The rest of them immediately provided support. This was the decision made by their captain, Demon King. No one objected. Yi Qian did not stay. When he did, Li Jingyan glanced at her. Seeing her nod slightly, he knew what she meant. Chapter 4286. She was a sniper. On the battlefield, a sniper could hold back 10,000 men. She had to follow them. Yang Heng looked at her back as she left. His eyes were so dark that they looked like a bottle of ink. His dark eyes were filled with deep worry. "You know Yi Qian, right? Don't worry. She's very powerful." High Anemone smiled and patted the translator who was clenching his fists. He was a handsome young man. Although he was a clerk, he was quite brave. "Let's go. We'll find a safe place and wait for them to come back." However, if he clenched his fists so tightly, he was worried that his knuckles would break. His voice was filled with laughter, and he did not sound worried at all. Yang Heng closed his eyes and chased after him. "Will they be okay?" The air was silent for a few seconds. High Anemone stared at Yang Heng for a few more seconds with a surprised expression. He felt that Yang Heng, a soldier, had asked a rather funny question. Then, Water Ghost, whose skin was tan but whose eyes were extremely sharp, laughed. "Translator, who can guarantee that nothing will happen to them on the battlefield? We all want to come back alive and live well. Then, we will participate in the next mission. I don't know if anything will happen to them, but I know that they will not let anything happen to them. Strictly speaking, Yang Hung was still a recruit. He had joined the army in December last year. It had only been half a year since then. Although he had a high level of awareness, he was still a recruit and had not been involved in this kind of mission. In addition, he was very worried about Yi Qian. After High Anemone finished speaking, Yang Hung clenched his fists so tightly that his palms were bleeding. Yes, why did he ask such a stupid question? Would anything happen to them? Bullets had no eyes. They risked their lives. Who knew if anything would happen to them? In fact, everyone knew that something would happen, but they still went. Because someone had to face these dangers, someone had to fight against evil, someone had to sacrifice their lives for the sake of the country. How important was that batch of materials? It was so important that when they were kidnapped, Commissioner Miao had told him, "Little Yang, we would rather die than say what we do. Even if we die, we have to take the secrets with us. We are individuals now, but our secrets are our country." It was not just a matter of words to make a country strong and its people rich. Behind a strong country, there were piles of bones. Sea Anemone and the other 3 water ghosts brought Commissioner Miao to a safe place, while Li Jinyan and Yi Qian rushed back to the Chinese peacekeeping camp as fast as they could. They finally saw the red flag fluttering in the wind above the camp. The sounds of gunfire also entered everyone's ears. The leader of the Storm Commandos, Demon King, quickly adjusted himself and began to support the battle. It is the main entrance. It has the most firepower and has heavy machine guns. The crossfire between the 2 wings was weak. Qing Yao, you're in charge of taking out the heavy machine gunners and our brothers in the camp. You don't have an AMR, only a rifle. How confident are you? The effective range of a Type 95 automatic rifle was 400 meters. Yi Qian nodded and said, "Sure, leave it to me." She was a sniper. Heavy machine gunners and cannoneers were usually handled by snipers. The platoon leader of the camp already knew that the special forces sent by the country had come to support them. Faced with the attack of the illegal militants, the 40-year-old platoon leader calmly commanded the battle. At the same time, he had already transferred the special materials to the shower room in the camp. The kitchen and medical center were not suitable. Once the camp was taken, these 2 places would be the first to be looted. The shower room was much safer. Chapter 4287. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos had a map of Yini City and several important strongholds, but they did not have a map of the peacekeeping camp. Sea Anemone and Seaweed had to scout the scene secretly while assigning tasks. Sea Anemone and Seaweed returned 10 minutes later and immediately hand-drew a map. Using this map as a reference, Li Jinyan ended the message from the camp and quickly arranged the battle arrangements and plans. Approach the battlefield from the side. We can hide through the depression in the battlefield and avoid the heavy machine gun fire. We can also attack from the side. Qing Yao can take out the heavy machine gunners, and we can suppress them with fire and attack directly. Attack from the side and split into 3 groups to cut off their retreat. Surround the target and don't let a single one of them escape. When he said the last sentence, Li Jinyan's cold eyes were filled with murderous intent. The entire battle deployment took 5 minutes. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos approached the enemy bit by bit, but they did not move immediately. They needed to wait for Yi Qian to move first before they could move. The sound of gunshots that reached their ears made the hearts of the water ghosts sink. It was the sound of heavy machine gun fire. The effective range of high-altitude shooting was 500 meters, and the firing rate in combat was 200 to 300 bullets per minute. The bullets were like water, and the bullet belt was zhung, zhung, zhung as it was delivered. The bullets were da-da-da as they were fired, forming a powerful wind of firepower. Under the attack of overwhelming firepower, the barracks without heavy weapons had not been taken down. This showed the combat level of the peacekeepers. The illegal militants who wanted to attack the Chinese peacekeeping camp and teach the other countries' peacekeeping camps a lesson were getting anxious. They did not expect that after attacking continuously for almost 40 minutes, the heavy machine gun fire still had not taken down the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Their patience was running out. They thought they had picked the country with the weakest military power, but who knew? It was so tenacious that it was beyond their imagination. But they had to take down the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Otherwise, they would not be able to intimidate the other countries, let alone the government forces. Amidst the sound of the heavy machine gun fire, the leader of the illegal militants who was in charge of attacking the Chinese peacekeeping camp shouted. Yi Qian could not hear what he was shouting, but he could not guess from the shape of his mouth. But one thing was for sure, it was definitely not something good. At this time, Yi Qian had already climbed up a tree that was unknown but could be seen from Libya. He used the leaves to hide himself. Although she was at a high point, her position was not the best shooting position. She was shooting at an angle because the machine gunner's position was higher than her current position. Furthermore, her current position was the highest point in the area. Due to the geography of the battlefield, she had no way of finding the best shooting position. She could only find the best position between the worst positions, a commanding point within the effective shooting range of a 95 rifle of 400 meters. Yi Qian had always been a one-man sniper. He did not need any spotter or the help of a laser rangefinder. The entire time, he calculated in his head and found the best position before setting up his sights. Yi Qian only took 3 minutes to calculate the angle between his position and the target, as well as the adjustment of the aiming gear. Due to the sunlight, the lens was covered with gauze to prevent the scope from reflecting light. Through the scope, she found the person in charge of this group of illegal militants, but she did not aim at him. Her attention was focused on the heavy machine gunner, aiming at his head. Chapter 4288. 1, 2, 3. Fire. Yi Qian's cold voice came through the earpiece. The primer of the Type 95 rifle was ignited by the impact of the firing pin. Unlike the high-altitude gunfire of the heavy machine gun, Yi Qian used single-shot shooting. As soon as she gave the order to fire, there was a bang. The heavy machine gunner was shot in the left side of his head. His body stood straight for a few seconds before he fell flat on top of the heavy machine gun. Yi Qian did not leave immediately. She aimed at the guy who had shouted at the heavy machine gunner earlier. Although she did not know what the guy had said, she could tell that he was very important. She did not care who he was. Since he had tried to push the dead heavy machine gunner away to take his place, he would be the second person she would kill. They did not notice the presence of a sniper and thought that the Chinese peacekeepers in the camp had shot the heavy machine gunner. It was not until Yi Qian opened fire again and Li Jingyan and the others attacked from the rear that the illegal militants closest to the heavy machine gun finally realized that there was a sniper. Snipers were the grim reaper of the battlefield. The existence of a sniper was a huge, visible, and extremely terrifying existence to their own side. Right now, Yi Qian was a terrifying existence to the illegal militants. They have a sniper. There's a sniper on our side. The illegal militants who had discovered the sniper started shouting. Some of them heard him, but some of them had already fallen under the bullets of the Storm Commandos. Their support. They're fighting from behind. Quick, find the sniper. Hurry up and find the sniper. Desmond is dead. Desmond is dead. He was killed by a sniper. Desmond was the person in charge of the attack on the camp this time. He was also one of the masterminds. Someone suggested that they attack the Chinese peacekeepers in Libya since they were the weakest in the country. Desmond strongly agreed. At that time, he did not expect that he would end up dying under the bullets of a Chinese sniper. At that time, he even said arrogantly that if he had 100 people and a heavy machine gun, he could take down the Chinese camp in less than half an hour. That was what he said, and that was what he believed. He believed very confidently. Reality slapped him so hard that he didn't even have the chance to repent before he was taken away by the Grim Reaper. Desmond's death threw the illegal armed forces into chaos. Snipers, reinforcements, and the stubborn resistance of the Chinese peacekeepers caused a large number of these people who had rushed overexcitedly and thought that they would definitely be able to get some benefits to instantly fall. Yi Qian continued to hide in the tree. Now, the advantage of being at a low altitude was here. Most people would think that a sniper would shoot from a high altitude. This was a fixed way of thinking, especially for those who did not understand sniping. The illegal militants knew there were snipers on the Chinese side, but they were all aiming for higher ground. Some of them were even trying to snatch the heavy machine gun. This time, Yi Qian, who had not left, was not aiming for people. Her goal was to turn the heavy machine gun into a useless gun that could no longer pose a threat. Yi Qian aimed at the receiver. When she heard the gunshots, she pursed her lips slightly. She lowered her eyes slightly and allowed her eyes to relax for a few seconds. Then, she took a deep breath and moved closer to the scope again. She was shooting from the side. From her position, the heavy machine gun was at an L angle. Moreover, it was at a high altitude. She could shoot from the side, but she could not shoot the receiver quickly enough. This was the problem that Yi Qian was facing. Chapter 4289. The receiver was the entrance to the heavy machine gun's ammunition chain. If this was destroyed, the entire heavy machine gun would become a decoration. There would be no way to transport the ammunition chain at high speed to complete the high-altitude shooting. The angle increased the difficulty of shooting. Yi Jian, who had readjusted, aimed again. The distance, the wind speed, the number of gears. Yi Jian had already begun to calculate quickly until the center of her eyes suddenly became fixed. Her finger pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! The third bullet rang out. The shot was completed from a low altitude to a high altitude. Bang! Bang! The receiver of the heavy machine gun was destroyed by a bullet. The spring and shaft of the receiver were so damaged that there was no way to repair them. Yi Qian had already jumped down from the tree. This time, she did not continue to hide in the tree. Her comrades had already rushed up, and now it was her turn. Yi Qian, who had rushed out like a monkey, said, "After you're done, bring the good stuff into the camp. I saw a few boxes of ammunition. There should be quite a lot of ammunition chains in there. Keep the guns and bullets. If there's any trouble in the future, at least there's a heavy weapon to hold the line." Only being equipped with a Type 95 rifle was a little too simple. It was fine if there were no heavy weapons, but why didn't they even have a grenade? She did not believe that the peacekeeping camps of the other countries did not have something more lethal. She, who was in charge of the right flank assault, spoke as she walked with her gun. This made the water ghosts, who had already charged in, relax for some reason. It was just a little, but they did not dare underestimate this group of people. Which countries were supporting the illegal armed forces in Libya and where their firearms came from? Actually, the various countries knew a little about it. But so what if they knew? There was no evidence. The firearms trade was free. So what if it was illegal? Since there was support behind them, the water ghosts could not be careless. They could not let others know why they were there or what they were going to do next. Everything was a secret operation. It was one level lower than top secret. The bullets whizzed past. Some of them accurately hit the vital points. Some of them avoided the vital points and hit other parts of the body, while some of them flew off and landed somewhere else. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos, who were fighting for the first time, were still in high spirits. The bullets flew in all directions, and the colors in their black eyes were frighteningly bright. The water ghosts that were attacking from the back had the upper hand. After the first round of attacks, they instantly took down the other party. What they wanted was to clear out the enemy in the first round, because the casualties in the first round were usually the heaviest. By the time the enemy reacted, the second round of cleansing would begin. The second round of elimination would lower the enemy's casualties and increase their own casualties. The risk of death would be greater than the first round. Big Eel, who was in charge of the assault on the right wing, suddenly felt as if his chest had been hit by a high-pressure heavy weapon. He fell backward uncontrollably. At that moment, the pain in his chest was so intense that he felt as if he had been run over by a car wheel. His heartbeat was out of order, and his blood pressure soared. Even his vision turned black. He was hit by a bullet. The Big Eel, which was turning black in front of his eyes, was dragged by the back of his collar by his comrades, as if he was dragging a sandbag to a safe area. In the buzzing sound in his ears, he heard his comrades shouting anxiously, "Damn it, say something." Then he felt as if his chest had been run over by a car. Just as he was about to grin and say something, he heard his comrade say fiercely, "F*CK, You're not dead. I'm not injured. Chapter 4290. Big Eel felt as if there was a kaleidoscope spinning in and out of his skull. Big Eel couldn't even focus his vision as he gasped for air. His brain, which had been knocked out by the heavy blow, finally regained some clarity. I'm not dead. The bulletproof vest protected me. He grinned until he saw his comrade fall to the ground. Sea Anemone, who had a hideous expression, couldn't help but curse under his breath. Damn it, you almost scare me to death. Take a breather. Big Eel was fine. The fighting water ghosts all heaved a sigh of relief. Their jaws tightened. You're still alive after being shot by a rifle. You're really lucky. Sea Anemone, whose eyes were red, wiped his sweat. He saw Yi Chien coming up with his two comrades in front of him. He took a deep breath and didn't say anything more to Big Eel. He rushed up again. He put his hand on his torn bulletproof vest, which still smelled of gunpowder, and began to check if his bones were injured. The bullet didn't penetrate his body, but the force of the bullet still hurt his ribs. It hurt even when he took a deep breath. He pressed his fingers gently, and his face contorted. His breathing suddenly increased. Damn it, his bones weren't broken, but they were cracked. Fortunately, it was a rifle bullet. Fortunately, the shooting distance was very far. Otherwise, a rifle bullet would have hit him, and he would have been seriously injured. Big Eel, who had been hit by a live bullet for the first time, still had lingering fears. Yi Chien took over Big Eel's position. She fired quickly and had a high hit rate. With her help and the support of the peacekeeping soldiers in the camp, the illegal militants on the right wing were all cleared out in 10 minutes. The blood of more than 20 people stained the yellow soil red. The right wing has been cleared out. The camp is responsible for the final cleanup. Yi Chien reported the latest news on their right wing. At the same time, she quickly moved towards the main camp's entrance. Big Eel, who wasn't even tied up, didn't mention his injuries. He only said, "I'm fine." He endured the pain of his broken bones and returned to the battle. "Right to o'clock, support." "Roger," someone shouted, and Yi Chien calmly responded. The peacekeeping soldiers in the barracks could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The injured soldiers also withdrew and hurriedly bandaged their wounds. The accompanying military doctors rushed into the emergency treatment. Every time they saw a wounded soldier being carried down, their faces would sink. A soldier had already been sacrificed, so they couldn't afford any more. Over the past few days, the peacekeepers stationed in Cowltown and Jenny City had been sacrificed. This was the first time they had suffered any casualties since entering Libya. Li Jinyan's cold voice entered Yi Chien's ears. "Qing Yao, come closer to me. 50 meters to your left." Sea Anemone and seaweed cover the Qing Yao and continue to clear the 2 o'clock direction. "Yes, yes, yes." 3 firm and powerful voices rang out. Yi Chien moved closer to Li Jinyan, while Sea Anemone and seaweed covered Yi Chien as he left. Yi Chien, who had moved closer, didn't shoot anymore. She moved forward 30 meters as fast as she could, then crawled forward another 20 meters to reach the target. Li Jinyan looked at his sister, who was like a god of death on the battlefield. He narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I'll attack with you. Quickly clear all the targets and send the items away. If this drags on, I'm afraid they'll have more support." "Okay, I have no problem." Yi Chien nodded. She was a sniper and assaulter in the Snowfield Brigade, so she was familiar with attacking. She wasn't afraid. Li Jinyan had asked Yi Chien to break through the encirclement with him because she had fought with live ammunition before. Her ability to fight was stronger than the water ghosts who were fighting for the first time. This was an indisputable fact. Chapter 4291. Li Jinyan knew that Yi Chien had combat experience, but the water ghost did not, so he was immediately opposed. De Xiao was the first to object. He should be the one to attack. She's suitable. Her shooting speed is fast. You guys cover her. Li Jinyan did not agree. Yi Chien was the most suitable at this time. They had been exchanging fire for a long time, so they had to end it as soon as possible. The water ghost's opposition made Yi Chien smile. She bent down to change her magazine and said with a smile, "Brothers, it's up to you. The sooner we finish this, the sooner we can wrap up. Don't you feel hungry now? I'm already very, very hungry." Needless to say, he was really hungry. With her interruption, the water ghost remembered that they had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. They had only drunk a few mouthfuls of water. Sea Anemone also smiled. Commissioner Meow and the rest should be even hungrier. The translator, I returned to say that he was so hungry that he wanted to eat grass. At this time, Commissioner Meow, Yang Hung, and the three professors had already moved to a safe area. Commissioner Meow, who was originally protected by 4 water ghosts, strongly urged them to return to the camp as soon as possible to provide support. They could take care of themselves. It was impossible for all 4 water ghosts to return to the camp to provide support. In the end, 2 water ghosts were left behind. Sea Anemone and Big Squid returned to provide support. Sea Anemone had already attacked twice. When he returned, he even dragged Big Eel, whose chest had been hit by a bullet, to a safe area. Now that the right wing had been cleared, Sea Anemone was also approaching the main entrance. At the mention of hunger, he casually mentioned that Yang Hung had said that he was so hungry that he wanted to eat grass. In an instant, the tense atmosphere dissipated. Yi Qian, who had finished changing her magazine, smiled. Yang Hung was a very cheerful and humorous boy. In high school, he had attracted countless girls to have a crush on him. Eat grass was indeed his style. There's no need to eat grass. When the time comes, I'll eat a bowl of noodles. I should be able to drink 2 big bowls of noodles. Yi Qian, who was bent down, had already changed to a crawl position. He gave Li Jinyan, who had also finished changing his magazine, a look. The siblings nodded slightly and began their assault. Cover, cover. Roger, Roger. Snip the minions around us. Be careful of them shooting. Roger, Roger. With Yi Qian and Li Jinyan's assault, the water ghosts had to fire so many times that the barrels of the rifles on their shoulders burned their hands. Bang, bang, bang. The gunshots were too intense. Bullets streaked across like rain, tearing through the air before ruthlessly shooting into the target's body. Blood flowed out, and the person fell to the ground. Boom! The sound of a grenade exploding could be heard. Flames sprang up from the left flank, and thick smoke spread out. This was the grenade that the illegal militants had thrown out earlier. It did not explode. When the water spirits in charge of the left flank saw the grenade, their first reaction was to scatter in all directions. Then, a few stray bullets hit the grenade. The sound of an explosion rang out, and shrapnel and soil flew in all directions. The explosion had already created a hole in the ground. The water ghosts who were doing the final cleanup didn't panic because of the explosion. They were only nervous and asked their brothers who were in charge of the cleanup on the left wing about the situation. Motherf ****, dud explosion. De Shao, who had been buried in a layer of soil, returned to his comrades. At this moment, his eardrums were hurting terribly. It was as if his whole body was placed in a vacuum. As the air pressure dropped, the ringing in his ears made his voice tremble. They're all fine. They dodged quickly. De Shao looked at his arm that had been pierced by shrapnel. Gritting his teeth, he quickly took out a bandage and wrapped it. He didn't have time to deal with other things. He had to stop the bleeding first. Chapter 4292. Big Eel was the closest to the dud, and he was also the first to discover it. Among the 3 of them, he was the only one who was hit by shrapnel. The other 2 water ghosts had already gathered and were covering for Big Eel, who was treating his wounds. If the left wing was fine, then it was fine. Now, the main thing was that there were at least 20 targets that needed to be cleared out at the main camp gate. In the camp, the peacekeeping soldiers, whose pressure had dropped, went all out. Reinforcements were here, and they couldn't put all the pressure on their brothers. This was great. The 60 to 70 soldiers in the peacekeeping camp went all out, and the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos entered the final stage of the cleanup. There was no room for these illegal militants to be arrogant. The fierce battle that lasted for 2.5 hours ended with the victory of the Chinese side. The illegal militants were not from the army. In fact, they were all residents of Libya. Before the civil war broke out, They were all ordinary residents. When a civil war broke out, the entire Libya was divided into three waves. One wave of NRPL militants, one wave of government forces, and one wave of illegal militants. Everyone wanted to rule Libya, and no one was willing to submit to anyone. Today, they fought each other, and tomorrow, they would fight each other. It could be said that there were casualties every day. The smoke had not dissipated, and the ground was littered with scattered bullets. The peacekeeping soldiers began to clean up the scene. As Yi Qian said, the heavy machine gun was directly transported back to the camp. A few water ghosts who were injured by stray bullets went to treat their wounds. Yi Qian, who had specially watched the heavy machine gun being transported back to the camp, simply repaired the gun. The cooking team already knew that the brothers who came to support hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. They immediately set up the pot, cut the vegetables, and cooked noodles for the brothers. Yi Qian only had some minor injuries. She just needed to wipe, scrape, and disinfect them. She simply didn't go over. She had already removed the body of the heavy machine gun. Several seriously injured peacekeeping soldiers were still in emergency treatment. The military doctors were all involved in the rescue, and the treatment of minor injuries was handed over to the accompanying nurses. The water ghosts of the storm commandos didn't ask the nurses for help. They entered the aluminum room with a red cross sign and directly handed it over to their comrades. When the nurses saw this, they turned around and treated the wounds of the injured peacekeeping soldiers. Li Jinyan wasn't there. He took a few uninjured water ghosts, reloaded their ammunition, and drove to pick up Commissioner Miao and the others. By the time the cookery team served the piping hot noodles and fragrant stir-fried dishes, Yi Qian was still fixing her gun. The person who came looking for her was Sea Anemone, who had brought her gun in with her. Looking at the parts on the ground, Sea Anemone gulped and asked cautiously, "Qing Niao, after you dismantle it, can you put it back?" After looking for her for so long, she was actually quietly dismantling her gun. Yi Qian did not raise her head. Kneeling on one knee, she put the parts back together and said with a smile, "Of course, I'll put the gun back together the way it was dismantled." Beside her, a soldier who was in charge of the maintenance of firearms in the camp smiled and said, "She's very professional. She knew where to start the dismantling as soon as she went on stage. She even told me where to change." Sea Anemone's eyes widened. "You can even fix guns?" "Yes, a little. Why are you looking for me?" "Commissioner Miao and the others are back." Yi Qian didn't see the shock in Sea Anemone's eyes. It wasn't a secret that she knew how to fix guns. Most of her comrades in the Snowfield Brigade knew about it, so it wasn't something worth keeping a secret. She was calm, but Sea Anemone was a little uneasy. "Excuse me, Qing Yao, is there anything you don't know? Aren't you hungry? Come, let's eat first. We'll come back after we're done." Looking at the parts of the heavy machine gun, Sea Anemone secretly rubbed her hands. It would be great if Qing Yao was added to their team. Chapter 4293. Yi Qian did not know that Sea Anemone was one of the people who wanted her to join the Storm Commandos. Yi Qian was not willing to stop what she was doing to eat, so she asked Sea Anemone to leave some food for her and wait for her to finish what she was doing. She was the one who dismantled the heavy machine gun, so she had to take responsibility for it. She was indeed hungry. Just as Yang Heng said, she was so hungry that she could even eat grass. At this time, it was already noon in Libya. Li Jinyan drove Commissioner Miao back to the camp in a truck. For safety reasons, Commissioner Miao did not sit in the front passenger seat. Instead, two water ghosts were in charge of driving while the rest sat in the back of the truck. Yang Heng took the water bottle and drank half of it in one go. There was still a mouthful left before he could swallow it. A male soldier who came to pick them up smiled and said, "You must be very hungry. You didn't eat grass when you got back, but there are some vegetables." Cough, cough, cough. The water that he had not swallowed went into his throat, causing Yang Heng's face to turn red. After coughing for a while, he wiped the water from the corner of his mouth and said awkwardly, "Just kidding, just kidding." It was just a casual remark. Could it be that he knew everything? Daxia, who was speaking, guessed what he was thinking when he saw his expression. He laughed and said, We were so hungry that we could eat grass. This grass is good, and it's quite delicious. They ate a lot of grass during training. What could Yang Hung say? He could only laugh. Da Xiao saw his awkwardness and did not say anything else. Translators were shy and did not have a close relationship. Jokes should stop. Prawn didn't say anything else, which made Yang Hung feel relieved. When he was with the Special Forces, he was more or less restrained, unlike Yi Jian, who could get along well with them. At first glance, he could tell that their friendship was deep. Yi Jian, he did not know how she was doing. Yang Hung glanced at the captain of the Special Forces who was sitting with Commissioner Miao. He hesitated for a while, bent over, and walked over with his hands on the shoulders of the 3 doctoral students. When he moved, Li Jinyan's gaze fell on him. When he saw this, he even reached out to pull him. The truck was shaking. Even when he moved over, his body still swayed. Yang Hung immediately held on tight and sat down steadily. He asked about Yi Qian. When Li Jinyan heard him mention Yi Qian's real name, his gaze became sharp for a few seconds. Yang Hung instantly felt that his gaze was like a scalpel that was about to cut him open from the inside out. Under such a pressuring gaze, Yang Hung said in a low voice, "We used to study in the same high school. My parents almost took her as their goddaughter, but Yi Qian didn't agree and my parents gave up. So that was the case." Although Li Jinyan's eyes were still cold, he retracted the sharpness in his eyes and said to Yang Hung, "She is fine. She is in the barracks now." He paused for a moment and then said, "Don't mention her when you go back." "Thank you. That's good. That's good." Yang Hung let out a sigh of relief. The heavy stone in his heart was finally lifted. He gently nodded. "I know. I won't tell anyone." They were silent for the rest of the journey. Yang Hung did not know how he fell asleep as he listened to the rumbling sound of the truck. The most beautiful coastline in Yeni City. The sky was washed by water, the sea was blue, and the waves were rolling in. A few seabirds brushed past the waves and quickly flapped their wings to fly high. In the distance, a transport plane was flying further and further away. Among the waves, there were several black lines chasing after 3 square objects floating on the sea in 2 directions. There was a tail behind them. It was the combat backpack that had been left behind. Chapter 4294. More than 10 Snowfield Brigade Special Forces had successfully landed from the transport aircraft. The weather was good, the sea was calm, and there was only a normal deviation from the landing point. In order to avoid being exposed, the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces were 5 nautical miles away from the coast. 5 nautical miles was about 9,400 meters, and the normal deviation was about 9,500 meters. If they were to swim, they would need 5 to 6 hours to reach the coast. Swimming was definitely not possible. They needed equipment. The square thing floating on the sea was an inflatable boat. It was similar to an escape ladder on an airplane. As long as they pulled it out, it would become an inflatable boat. The 3 groups of people quickly pulled the floating thing apart. The square thing instantly turned into an inflatable boat. They first put a comrade on it, then pulled everyone onto the inflatable boat. The 3 inflatable boats had 5 people on each boat. They then picked up the equipment and set off towards the coast in less than 10 minutes. Some of the equipment could not be opened, such as land communication equipment, GPS, and other electronic equipment. They took out the rifle from the waterproof cover and loaded the magazine. The basic equipment was complete. They took out the oil stick and painted their faces so that even their parents would not be able to recognize them. They even painted their lips. When they were done, their eyes were as sharp as arrows. With the inflatable boat, their speed was much faster. Yi Qian installed the heavy machine gun and handed it over to the soldiers in charge of maintaining the guns. Finally, they ate a bowl of noodles and stir-fried it. No more, no less. They really ate 2 big bowls. Xia Jinyuan led the troops ashore. Yi Qian and the others had already tied the special materials to their bodies and were ready to set off. "We must bring them all back to China. We are waiting for them. We are just 1 step away from completing our mission." Before they left, Commissioner Miao, who could not accompany them, carefully reminded them that these special materials were more precious than his life. They must be protected well. The 50 kilograms were tied to the 16 Special Forces soldiers. They even gave up their backpacks and only wore their tactical vests, magazines, and guns. They were almost light. Li Jinyin wrapped the specially processed material tightly around his waist and said to Commissioner Miao, "Don't worry. We'll bring all 50 kilograms back to the country. Even if there's only one person left, we'll bring them back." Good. With tears in his eyes, Commissioner Miao raised his hand and gently patted the young soldier's shoulder. "This is our hope. We entrust our hope to you." This sentence was filled with the noble spirit of a scientist, Pan Guoqiang, who was fearless in sacrifice and disregarded his own life. This was another hope for the powerful military, as well as the hope of those scientists who had fallen asleep in their laboratories. Li Jin's team was afraid that it would affect their marching speed, so they firmly disagreed. Commissioner Miao, Commissioner Tao, the 3 doctoral students, and the translator, Yang Heng, saluted him. This was hope. He would definitely return home with hope. At 3:37 in the afternoon, the water ghosts of the storm commandos who had finished cleaning up the battlefield drove away. As they were leaving, Yi Qian turned around and looked deeply at Yang Heng. Yang Heng did not agree to come along. No matter how she tried to persuade him, he insisted on staying. He also told her why Libya was filled with enemies and why some ambitious Western countries had joined in. Because the country was weak. If a country was weak and passive, then it would be beaten. The Chinese side, which had been beaten before, could not repeat the same mistakes. The law of the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak, had never changed. Chapter 42:95. Looking back at her old friend, Yi Qian saw him smiling and waving at her. She raised her hand and waved goodbye to him. "See you in China, Yang Heng," she said softly in her heart. Xia Jinyuan led the soldiers to the coast. The platoon leader of the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Yeni City did not see them off. He was so busy that he wished he could split into 3 people. There were things to deal with in the camp, such as the post-war cleanup, and some things to deal with in the mines located in the depths of the rainforest more than 100 kilometers away from the camp. After Li Jinyin and the others left, the captain was talking to the person in charge of the mine with a frown on his face. "That's tricky. We were attacked by the illegal militants for 2.5 hours today. The camp was injured, and a peacekeeping soldier sacrificed himself." The captain's face darkened at the mention of the sacrifice. "I'll try my best to send a squad over. We have to prevent them from attacking the camp again." It was unknown what was said on the other end of the line, but the squadron leader smiled bitterly. 2 classes, no more. The special materials sent to the camp will be taken out this afternoon. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Okay, I'll send 2 squads over. You guys try to persuade them again. If they do it once, there will be a second time. Since the equipment is almost transferred, let's leave as soon as possible. The situation is tense, and we don't know how long the government army can hold on. We can't leave anyone in the mine, not even the guards. When the captain ended the call, he learned that the special forces had left. Commissioner Miao and Commissioner Tao insisted on staying in the camp. They could have left, but they knew that they could not keep up with the special forces' marching speed. If something happened, they would be implicated, no matter how they persuaded them. Even if they contacted the country, the 2 commissioners refused to go with them. Even the 3 accompanying disciples insisted on staying. The reason was that they needed to take care of the 2 mentors. The captain sighed. The camp was safe for the time being, and they would protect the 2 commissioners with their lives. He had already applied to evacuate Jenny City, and it was up to the Libyan president to see if he would allow it. Today, it was all thanks to these brothers. Otherwise, the entire camp would have become a slaughterhouse. If it were not for the importance of the materials, he really did not want to leave. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the illegal militants occupying Jenny City received reinforcements. Jenny City was in a state of emergency. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the government forces that were clearly on the verge of victory suffered yet another crushing defeat, and Jenny City was completely occupied by the illegal armed forces. The camp immediately notified the Chinese mining factory that was more than 100 kilometers away from the camp, asking the Chinese employees who were still guarding the factory and transferring the equipment to abandon the factory and leave. Since the start of the war in Unyielding City at 4 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday, the Chinese government had issued a notice to evacuate all the Chinese employees in the mines immediately, not leaving a single one behind. There were more than 100 Chinese factories, and the person in charge immediately arranged for vehicles to evacuate the employees after receiving the notice. However, the employees with Libyan nationality were unwilling to leave. The Chinese company had invested a lot in the mine, and the Libyan employees were unwilling to leave. Even the person in charge had no way to leave. While transferring the employees who were willing to leave, he persuaded the Libyan employees who did not want to leave. He swore to God that once the mine started operating, he would immediately invite them back to work. He even printed out the agreement, but in the end, it was to no avail. Until today, there were still 64 Libyan employees who were unwilling to leave. The person in charge of the Chinese side had tried countless times to persuade them, but they still refused to let them leave. That was until the illegal militants rushed in and aimed their cold, black gun barrels at the workers. Chapter 4296. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the mine jointly developed by Chinese and Libyan enterprises was occupied by illegal militants. All the Chinese and Libyan employees who did not have time to evacuate were controlled by the illegal militants. There were 12 Chinese employees, one of whom was the main person in charge, 2 of whom were technicians, 9 of whom were staff who evacuated important equipment in the mine, and 64 Libyan employees. A total of 76 mine employees fell into the hands of the illegal militants. The city of Jinni fell, and the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jinni was completely evacuated. The captain had lost contact with the mine. He had no way of contacting the person in charge of the mine who had been on the phone with him 2 hours ago. After failing to contact him several times, he had a strong sense of foreboding in his heart. Then he thought of the 2 squads he had sent to support, and the captain felt a little relieved. After ending the call with the person in charge of the mine, he immediately sent 2 squads to pick them up and drove directly. 2 hours had passed, and they should have arrived at the mine by now. Although he thought so, the captain was still worried. As he evacuated, he contacted the mine from time to time, but there was no news until 5 o'clock. The evacuation of the Chinese camp was not very smooth either. Jinni had fallen, and the government forces could not take care of themselves. When they evacuated, the wounded were sent to the camp, which indirectly increased the difficulty of the evacuation of the camp. They received the evacuation notice from the president, but there was no way to evacuate. Report. The captain, who was so busy that he could not split himself, heard the report outside the door. He put down the microphone and said in a deep voice, "Please come in." He still did not get in touch with the mine. Things were getting more and more troublesome. A soldier wearing a helmet and holding a gun walked in to report the latest news. "Captain, another 12 injured civilians have been sent to the camp for treatment." "Okay, I got it. We'll take them in for the time being." The captain's expression became more and more solemn. More and more injured people were sent over. The United Nations Medical Center was full, and the injured civilians began to be sent to the Peacekeeping Camp Medical Center in the 3 countries in Libya for treatment. Now, it was up to the United Nations. The captain, who did not have time to think about the situation of his brothers who had left, received a call from the Russian peacekeeping camp in Libya. Due to the tense situation, and because they learned that the Chinese peacekeeping camp was attacked by illegal militants, the Russian peacekeeping force sent a small team of 10 people to support the Chinese side and transferred some of the injured to the Russian peacekeeping camp. However, the captain smelled a trace of abnormality in the call with the Russian side. There were a total of 3 countries' peacekeeping forces in Unyielding City: Russia, Britain, and China. Among the 3 countries, Russia and China often contacted each other and exchanged information. Britain rarely contacted each other and would not easily exchange information unless it was necessary to carry out peacekeeping operations. Even though Russia and China had good relations with the two peacekeeping forces, they had never sent troops to support them. Now that they had suddenly sent out their troops, their intentions must be deep. He did not know how the brothers who had left were doing. Jenny City was in chaos, and he was afraid that they would not be able to move around. Furthermore, they had important materials with them. Only the Chinese camp were attacked were the illegal militants. The company leader's expression suddenly changed. Even his aura became cold and ruthless. He originally did not want to disturb the Brotherhood Company, who were leaving with the important materials, but now he had no choice but to disturb them. He needed to know how they were doing and whether they had encountered any difficulties. Chapter 4297. Just as he had guessed, the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos were having a hard time moving around. Although the peacekeeping camp was in the suburbs of Jenny City, it was still part of the city. After more than 2 hours, they had only just left the city and entered the jurisdiction of Cowltown. As long as everything is fine, get to Cowltown as soon as possible. I just spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Fong in Cowltown. The situation in the town is still stable. A large number of government troops are stationed there. It's relatively safe for you to enter Cowltown. After half a day, the water demons being safe and sound became the best news that the company leader had received. As long as they were fine, as long as they were fine, as long as they were fine. If a batch of brothers could leave, then so be it. After ending the call, the captain's expression relaxed. If they were fine, then the special materials they had brought with them were also fine. Li Jinyan and the rest were not too sure about the situation in Jenny City. However, after ending the call with the captain, Li Jinyan's sharp senses picked up on the captain's unusual behavior. After thinking for a while, he immediately contacted the Chinese camp in Cowltown. The illegal militants have enough troops. The government troops have lost the initiative. The entire city has fallen. You're lucky to have left early. Otherwise, you would have been trapped. The president has issued a notice for Old Zhu and the rest to retreat as soon as possible. It's been more than an hour now, but Old Zhu and the rest have not retreated. They're being held back by the wounded civilians who were sent over. Lieutenant Colonel Fong, who is stationed in the camp in Cowltown, said solemnly, I've sent a battalion over to provide support. I hope they can leave safely. Also, we've lost contact with the mine. There are more than 10 Chinese employees who stayed behind because the Libyan employees did not cooperate. We can't contact them now, and we don't know how they are doing. We're waiting for the 2 squads that Old Zhu sent out to report back. Lieutenant Colonel Fong did not know that Lieutenant Colonel Zhu had not informed him of the current situation. He thought that the brothers who came to provide support would know. Seeing that Li Jinyan had specifically come to ask about the situation in Jenny City, he told Li Jinyan the most serious problem at the moment. In the end, he said, the United Nations has called for an emergency meeting and sent members of the United Nations to negotiate with the leader of the illegal militants in Libya to stop the war. This was a domestic matter in Libya, and all peacekeeping forces were strictly neutral in their operations. They did not interfere with the internal affairs of the countries they were stationed in, and they were not biased toward any side in the conflict. Therefore, even if the illegal militants were to run amok in Jenny City, the peacekeeping forces had no right to interfere. They could only send people to mediate. The illegal militants also took advantage of this fact, which was why they rarely opened fire on the peacekeeping troops. Today, they opened fire on the Chinese peacekeeping camp. In the end, they learned a terrible lesson. The 100 troops they sent were all eliminated by the Chinese side. When the representatives of the United Nations were negotiating with the illegal militants, the other party deliberately hid this matter and did not mention that they had opened fire on the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Then, a new force was mobilized and sent to the Chinese camp. We received news that there are things in the 2 Chinese camps in Libya that are more valuable than gold. If we find them, someone is willing to buy them at a high price and provide a batch of elite military equipment, including heavy weapons. This was the offer made by the other party, and it was quite tempting. The leader of the illegal militants accepted the negotiation with the representatives of the United Nations while secretly sending troops to the Chinese camp. The peacekeepers sent by Russia to support the Chinese camp had arrived. Without any rest, they immediately transferred some of the wounded out of the Chinese camp, including 4 seriously injured Chinese peacekeepers who had been rescued. Chapter 4298. The soldiers sent by the Russian side could only communicate in English. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's English was good, so he could communicate with them. As for the peacekeepers, they couldn't communicate too deeply. They could only communicate in simple daily language. Fortunately, they didn't need to communicate too deeply. Besides language, they could also communicate through hand gestures. This way, they could understand each other's intentions. The 4 peacekeepers who were pulled back from the brink of death were first carried into the vehicle. The Russians had considered everything and even sent an accompanying military doctor. The Chinese side also sent an accompanying military doctor and a nurse. As for the Libyan civilians sent to the Chinese military, the Russians also transferred some of them, but not all of them. There was no other way. The Russian medical center was also overcrowded. Soon, the vehicles sent by the Russians left with the wounded. The 10 Russian soldiers were all arranged under Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's arrangement. With the support of the Russian soldiers, even though there were only 10 of them, Lieutenant Colonel Zhu felt much lighter. The transfer of the 4 heavily injured peacekeepers made Lieutenant Colonel Zhu feel much more at ease. The illegal militants only targeted the Chinese peacekeepers. The reason for this was enough to make Lieutenant Colonel Zhu worried. Fortunately, the most important things had been transferred. If they were attacked again, they would fight to the death. When the Russian support arrived at the Chinese camp, the water demons led by Li Jinyan knew how dangerous the Chinese camp was. In addition, they had lost contact with the mine. After ending the call, Li Jinyan was filled with killing intent. He didn't say a word for a long time. The other water demons were also silent. Next, they definitely couldn't leave like this. However, they had special materials that Guochang wanted. Should they enter or retreat? It was a dilemma. If we leave like this, more people will be sacrificed, Yi Qian said softly. His slender hands gripped the rifle so tightly that the green veins on the back of his hands could be clearly seen. Yi Qian, who looked calm on the surface, looked at the commander of the entire team. Now, they were waiting for the commander to make a decision. Yi Qian opened his mouth. The team members, who were originally looking down, looked at their captain in unison. The atmosphere was so quiet that it was stifling. Their mouths and noses seemed to be covered, making it especially difficult to breathe. It was suffocating. Qing Yao was right. If they left like this, more people would be sacrificed. Demon King Li, who received the gazes of his team members, didn't change his expression. He was still as cold as before. He said to Xia, "Contact the country." He was very calm, as if he could smoothly solve any difficult problem. Yes. Xia nodded and immediately contacted the country. The situation in Yemen was tense, and the military had been paying close attention to it. Now, the Chinese side had sent 2 special forces to Yemen in secret. One of them was the ace of the special forces, and 15 of them were equivalent to the strength of a battalion. They would carry out the assassination operation and kill the leader. Contact the Storm Commandos and find out where they are right now. Contact the civil transport plane that arrived in Yani City this morning and ask it to return immediately to meet the Storm Commandos. Chapter 4299. Commander-in-Chief Xia gave the order and immediately contacted the Libyan Aviation Management Center and the Storm Commandos at the same time. Big Shrimp from the Storm Commandos looked at the code and said to Li Jinyan, "They're already here. There should be arrangements. 1. Immediately head to Cowell Town and find a landing spot for the civilian transport plane. 2. The materials will be sent back to China by the transport plane. 2 electromagnetism specialists, 3 doctoral students, and interpreters will accompany them. 3. The Chinese peacekeeping soldiers stationed in Cowell Town will send them back to China. The Storm Commandos will head to the mine to rescue the employees from the 2 countries. 4. The civilian transport plane will enter the airspace of Cowltown in 1.5 hours. The Storm Commandos must find a landing spot within this hour and a half. This was the order given by the Navy commander to the Storm Commandos. Commander-in-Chief Xia was the commander-in-chief of the army. Due to the different military branches, he could not give orders directly. The new orders and new arrangements lifted the spirits of the Storm Commandos. With that, the problem they were in was solved perfectly. The military portable received the satellite map of Jinny City and Cowltown. Based on the satellite map and the information provided by the Libyan government, Li Jinyan found the most suitable landing spot as quickly as possible. Not the best, but the most suitable. This was because they needed to go to the mine to rescue the employees from the two countries. In order to shorten the travel time, they chose a suitable landing spot that was relatively close to the mine. At the same time, they also considered that Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 could reach the destination within 1.5 hours and successfully board the plane to return to China. 10 minutes later, the radar of the civil transport plane that returned to China, according to the original plan, was locked onto again. It completed a mid-air turn and flew to its destination. Lieutenant Colonel Fong of the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Cowltown received the latest order and immediately sent a squad to a certain place in Cowltown. The squad would escort the 2 commissioners and a batch of important materials back to China. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu also received the latest order and immediately arranged for a vehicle to escort Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 to their destination. We don't need to go to the mine for the time being. The higher-ups have made arrangements. In a corner of Jinny City, K7, who was wearing a military uniform of a different brand, said to Xia Jinyuan, who was also wearing a military uniform of a different brand, "Let's get rid of the cancer here. If the matter over there is still not settled, it won't be too late to go over and provide support." Xia Jinyuan stood in a dark corner where the sunlight could not reach. His tall and slender body leaned casually against the wall. When he heard the question, he asked calmly, "Did he say which Brotherhood company it was?" "No, I only said that he's strong." K7 shook his head. He squinted his eyes and said with interest, "Could it be one of our comrades? Has his head been kicked by a donkey?" Xia Jinyuan glanced at K7. The words that came out of his thin lips made K7's heart ache. "Do you think the military is too expensive? They even came in 2 batches? F***CK. You're the captain. You're smart." K7 shut up. A few of the team members who heard the conversation silently curled their lips. Yes, he wasn't wrong. His head had indeed been kicked by a donkey. A black shadow flashed in, followed by another black shadow. Xia Jinyuan, who was in the dark, looked lazy and casual a second ago. But in the next second, his eyes were cold, like a ferocious beast that had just awakened. "We found the nest." The first sentence that came out of the black shadow's mouth made the team members, who were waiting for the news, stand up one by one and stare at the black shadow. Chapter 4300. Everything would be fine once they found a nest. The scouts, Long Eagle and Young Sparrow Hawk, brought back the news. The second the blood-red setting sun fell from the clouds to the horizon, night fell. The haze of the night began to envelop the entire city of Jinny. Dozens of black shadows quietly swept past the dark corners and headed toward the port of Jinny. The target's coordinates were the port, 6 kilometers away from a port. They would arrive in half an hour. The special forces with fierce eyes quickly began their combat deployment. The equipment brought by the Snowfield Brigade was several levels better than the lightly equipped Storm Commandos. Codename E6 was holding an anti-material sniper rifle with a range of 1,500 meters and a 12.7mm caliber M99. K7 was holding wireless equipment and infrared equipment. Explosives Master V8 was holding a C4 and smoke grenade. Explosives Master G3 was holding a fire control system. T6 was holding a personal computer. Everyone was equipped with a life support system and weapon subsystem. It could be said that they were currently carrying the most advanced personal combat equipment. They had almost everything they wanted. The ballistic calculator was turned on, and the three-dimensional battle-dimensional electronic map of the entire port that Long Eagle and Young Sparrow Hawk had scouted was inserted into the computer. Xia Jinyuan began his combat deployment for the day. The first to be arranged was the sniper's position. Sniper E6 and observer Y6 quickly calculated the best all-around sniping position according to the dimensional electronic map and the ballistic calculator. The sniper's position is also our retreat route. After cutting in from this line, Xia Jinyuan scanned the electronic map with a laser pointer in his hand. His expression became colder under the faint light of the computer screen. The attack point's coordinates are 20 meters to the left of the port's entrance. The retreat point's coordinates are position A of the port's unloading area. Sniper E6, cover us and clear out the heavy firepower. Understood. Sniper E6 and Observer Y6 nodded at the same time. Explosive Specialists V8 and G3, cut in from here. Use Aqua Regia to dissolve the metal door. Clean up the mess inside first. Understood. V8 and G3 quickly looked at each other and nodded slightly. Aqua Regia, also known as regal acid and nitrohydrochloric acid, was a very corrosive liquid. It could melt steel directly when poured on it. It was a very common invasion tactic in individual combat. Aqua Regia was easy to decompose and had the smell of chlorine. It could not be prepared in advance and had to be prepared on the spot. Long Eagle, Young Sparrow Hawk, you two provide the distance of the route. I want the distance to be precise as 0. Do you understand? The distance of the route was directly related to the success or failure of the entire battle. After Xia Jinyuan finished speaking, he stared at the two of them coldly and said, "My life is in your hands." Understood. The two scouts nodded. They had brought laser rangefinders with them. Combined with the wall-penetrating infrared, it was completely possible. Following Captain Xia Jinyuan's arrangement, the Special Forces soldiers who were hiding in the dark all knew their positions and how to cooperate with each other. The computer closed, and the cold light on the screen disappeared instantly. The flash of light on the screen made every Special Forces soldier's eyes flash with a cold, strange, and extremely vicious light. Set off. After the final order was given, all the Special Forces soldiers walked out of the darkness and into another darkness. The Snowfield Brigade and the Storm Commandos had different combat styles. All the Special Forces soldiers in the Snowfield Brigade were elites who were good at assassination, sneak attacks, decapitation, and other individual combat. As the most elite Special Forces soldiers in China who were completely unknown to others, the combat power of one person was ordinary. A squad, 2 squads, or even a platoon of soldiers could not do anything to them. Chapter 43:01. This time, they were carrying out Operation Decapitation. They were going to decapitate the leader of an illegal armed group that had secret ties with a Western country. Mission code, Operation Sandstorm. It was unknown if the negotiations between the representatives of the United Nations had been effective, but the fighting in Jenny City had become much weaker. Of course, it was possible that the government forces were almost completely wiped out, leaving only the stubborn soldiers who had yet to be taken care of. The Black Shadow shuttled through the city like a ghost. It was so fast that it seemed like its heels didn't touch the ground. It was as if it was floating all the way, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. A transport plane finally landed on its 4th attempt after 3 test landings under the guidance of a flash stick. Commissioner Miao, Commissioner Tao, 3 doctoral students, and translator Yang Heng boarded the civil transport plane at 6:27 in the evening to return to China. However, they needed a transfer midway. Yang Heng boarded from the back of the plane. When he was a few steps away from the cabin, he turned around and looked behind him. At this time, the sky was already dark. Standing in a hazy night sky, he could only see silhouettes and blurred faces. Even so, Yang Heng could still see Qian's figure among the male soldiers at a glance. At 168 meters, she was tall in a group of girls, but in a group of male soldiers, she was especially petite. Her petite body and petite figure was holding the exact same rifle that the male soldiers were holding. Standing there, her figure was as straight as an arrow that pierced through the clouds. Her aura was not inferior to the male soldiers at all. In fact, she was even more stubborn and cold than the male soldiers. This was the completely unfamiliar Yi Qian. It was like another Yi Qian that was unfamiliar to him. A Yi Qian that was never known by the students or even her friends. Working in a high-risk job and fighting side by side with a group of Special Forces soldiers as a student, this Yi Qian was getting further and further away from the Yi Qian that he was familiar with. She was becoming more and more different. Take care. I'll wait for you to return to China. Yang Heng didn't know if she would see it, but his gaze had been fixed on her the entire time. He nodded slightly and silently said that in his heart. He turned around and walked into the cabin, taking the special materials with him as he embarked on the journey back to China. Soon, the transport plane took off again. The rumbling sound was like an avalanche as it returned to the sky with a strong gust of wind. In a short while, it turned into a black dot. Only the lights on both sides of the plane were flashing like stars. Finally, it disappeared into the night. Calling the command center, calling the command center. Our plane has taken off safely and will land at Diluo Airport in 8 hours. We will land at Diluo Airport in 8 hours. Roger, Roger. Radar lock complete. Radar lock complete. In the sky, the captain called the command center. On the ground, Li Jinyan got in touch with the Navy commander and reported their latest news. They had already left the temporary landing point of the transport plane and were heading to the mine to rescue the employees of the two countries who were being controlled by the illegal militants. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu finally received the latest news about the mine. Of the 2 squads of soldiers he sent out, 3 of them rushed back and reported everything they knew about the mine. There are more than 70 illegal militants controlling the mine. The radio has been blocked by them, so there is no way to contact the outside world. There are still illegal militants on the way. We temporarily drove the car into the forest to hide. We'll come back on foot. Lieutenant Colonel, we have to send troops as soon as possible. The soldier's report made Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's thick eyebrows knit together. There were already more than 70 illegal militants. If they encountered them on the way, then the Special Forces brothers who were going to rescue them would have to fight fiercely again. Chapter 43:02. Colonel Zhu listened to the soldier's report with furrowed brows. After a moment of silence, he turned around and stopped in front of a military map. This was the military map of the entire city, including the rainforest where the mine was located. Where exactly is the car parked? He asked the soldier. The soldier pointed out the approximate location where the car was hidden on the military map. Colonel Zhu's eyes flashed with joy. Without waiting for a moment, he entered the tent and asked the soldier to contact the Brotherhood company that went to rescue the hostages. After several communications, Colonel Zhu finally got in touch with the storm commandos that had already entered the rainforest. The mine located in the northwest of the city was located in the rainforest. The rainforest was divided into 2 parts. 59% of the rainforest belonged to Libya and 41% belonged to the neighboring country. It was rich in minerals. Libya was rich in minerals, forests, and other resources. However, because it was one of the poorest countries, it did not have the ability to develop, mine, and make good use of these resources. The Chinese mining company and the Libyan mining company signed a 5-year contract to develop and share the resources together. When Li Jinyan was talking to Colonel Zhu, the big mermaid pointed at a red sandalwood tree and said to Yi Qian, "Only Libya has such a big red sandalwood tree. Unfortunately, to the Libyan people, this is just a tree. It can't change anything." Red sandalwood was the world's top furniture material. There was a saying in our country, "An inch of red sandalwood is worth an inch of gold." After a short rest, Yi Qian used his hands like a fan to fan himself. The air was a little stuffy. After 4 consecutive days of sunny weather, Yi Qian was soon greeted with a heavy rain. The rainforest was the same. She raised her head and looked at the red sandalwood tree that required 2 grown men to hug. This was the first time she saw a red sandalwood tree. If the Great Mermaid did not point it out to her, she would not have known that she had been so close to the red sandalwood tree. It was said that an inch of red sandalwood was worth an inch of gold. He touched the rough bark of the tree and sighed softly. The resources were rich, but because of poverty, they could not make use of them. This allowed the valuable red sandalwood tree to survive. She did not know if it was a blessing or a tragedy. It seemed like the tragedy was greater than the blessing. The big mermaid thought of something. After that, she fell silent. 3 minutes later, Li Jinyan ended the call and spoke to Sea Anemone in a low voice. After another 2 minutes, the water ghost received a piece of good news. There was a hidden truck with a full tank of gas, and with any luck, it would be able to drive through. Every vehicle in the peacekeeping camp was equipped with a GPS. At present, it seemed that the vehicles were still in place and had not been driven away by the illegal militants or the Libyan residents of the rainforest. This was good news. Although the car was parked at a place where they had to take a detour, it was better than walking on 2 legs. The group of 16 continued their rapid march. They were 64 kilometers away from a mine. The price to pay for such a close distance was that they had to carve out a path in the rainforest, a path that no one else would take after they had walked it. There was no path at all for the closest distance, and he had to rely on his own 2 feet to create a path. He went straight through the dense forest where there was no path, and the mosquitoes were as large as mutated species in the rainforest. The primeval rainforest here was different from the primeval rainforest at the border of Yin Province. Sometimes, the trees in Yin Province's primeval rainforest would reach the sky. Due to the lack of sunlight, there were only very short shrubs on the ground. The pine needles on the ground were thick. As far as the eye could see, there were straight tree trunks with very few shrubs. But here, there were all kinds of unknown trees that were taller than a person. Between the trees, there were extremely dense shrubs, and within the shrubs, there were also thorny vines that grew and intertwined. With one step, the entire person would disappear. Chapter 43:03. He equipped the rifle in his hand with a military knife and used the military knife to cut a path to both sides. Just like that, he forcefully cut a path. It was already 7:32 in the evening. The mine's power plant was restarted, illuminating the entire mine as if it was daytime. Armed illegal militants were guarding the mine. The people inside couldn't get out, and the people outside couldn't get in. The peacekeepers who had been watching the mine hid behind the leaves of a wild banana tree. Their hands tightened as they held their rifles, and their eyes stared ahead without blinking. 2 peacekeepers had taken the risk to enter the mine. Now, the power plant was turned on, and the power grid was working again. There was no way out. They didn't know if their brothers had returned safely or if the government would send reinforcements. To be honest, they didn't have much hope that the government would send reinforcements. With Yemen in such chaos, the government couldn't even take care of itself. How could they send any extra troops? It was up to the Libyan mine companies to come up with a countermeasure. It finally started to rain. It wasn't a drizzle, nor was it heavy. Instead, it was a torrential downpour that made the leaves and the ground rustle. Port SAS, which was located in the northwest of Yemen, looked abandoned from the outside. It was so dilapidated that weeds grew everywhere. A few dark trails passed by in the heavy rain, silently entering the port. There were countless large ships with rusty decks that hadn't sailed for a long time. There were also a few large ships in the harbor for maintenance. In the rainy night, it was like a dormant beast waiting to wake up. The leader of the illegal militants, Clos Caesardin, was hiding in Port SAS. No one would have thought that this illegal militant leader who started wars from time to time had always been there and had never left. These abandoned ships weren't really abandoned. They were all used by Clos Caesardin. All the reinforcements needed to enter Yemen, including the rebel General Arwa, were sent from here. This was an important port that led to the Atlantic Ocean. Along the coastline, one could enter all the ports in Libya. Clos Caesardin had sent the illegal militants into Yemen through the port. After entering the port, Sniper E6 and spotter Y6 immediately left the team and found their vantage point. This was their comrades' escape route. They had to guard it well. Sniper in position. Spotter in position. The two hidden under the tarpaulin reported their positions. The anti-material rifle was set up, and the photoelectric sight was calibrated and aimed at a certain spot. There, Ku Luo Kisardan's sentries were keeping a close watch. A rainy night was a very convenient time to commit murder. The intertwining rainwater was pouring down, and even the slightest movement would be covered by the rainwater. According to the information provided by the government forces, Kulo Caesardin was in the abandoned ship numbered 11662 in the middle. All the black shadows snuck into the abandoned ship as fast as they could without alerting the hidden sentries. With the appearance of anti-jamming, the Z7 immediately went into electromagnetic silence and used multiple access and spread spectrum to hide their wireless communication bands. A few green figures appeared on the screen. Z7 stretched out his hand and clenched his fist. It meant that he would deal with all 5 of them in one go. The aqua regia was poured onto the iron sheet. After a puff of smoke, a big hole was melted out of the tightly locked iron door. Then the door was gently pushed open bit by bit. 3 black shadows rushed forward fiercely and instantly killed the 3 outermost guards. Chapter 4304. There was no sound, no struggle. Just like that, he slit his throat from behind and eliminated the targets. Forward, turn left. 2 people eliminated. Z7 spoke softly. He took down the 3 shadows that had eliminated the targets and continued to move. Not long after, he saw that the 2 targets had been eliminated. The reason why an assassination was called an assassination was that it had to be done quietly and without alerting anyone, including the target. From the beginning of the operation to the end of the evacuation, they had to come and go without a trace. However, although the harbor where Kulo Caesardin was hiding seemed peaceful, it was actually filled with danger. As the captain, Xia Jinyuan could not guarantee that the entire process would go smoothly. Therefore, he had arranged for an ambush in advance to preserve his strength until the very end. Over. K7's cold and monotonous voice came through the earpiece. He was the most suitable person for this kind of sudden attack. He was an assaulter after all. The comrades who had entered could no longer see their targets. They had all been dragged to a corner to avoid being discovered. The 5 of them were neither sentries nor patrolling soldiers. They looked more like lazy guys who were blocking the entrance for the special forces. As for the real entrance, Xia Jinyuan had no choice at all. If he wanted to enter from the real entrance, he would have to eliminate the sentries. It was not easy to eliminate the sentries, but the difficult part was after the sentries were eliminated. What if he was discovered? Therefore, he never considered entering from the real entrance for every assassination operation. Instead, he would create another entrance to ensure that no one would notice. However, after entering the cabin for real, Xia Jinyuan quickly realized that the information provided by the Libyan government might not be accurate. The intelligence indicated that Kulo Caesardin was a cunning leader of illegal militants who had high-tech weapons by his side. Other than the sentries they had infiltrated, there were no other high-tech weapons in the cabin. Other than the radio waves captured by Z7, there was not even a basic infrared device. There was surveillance equipment, but it was useless after Z7 hacked into it. Reinvestigate. Realizing that the information was not accurate, Xia Jinyuan made a prompt decision. He had Z7 hack into the surveillance equipment to see if he could find any clues. Z7's main focus was electronic information warfare. His comrades around him were on high alert. His fingers flew across the screen and quickly hacked into the equipment's database. After checking all the surveillance cameras and filtering through them several times, Z7's eyes lit up after 10 minutes. Kulo Caesardin wasn't hiding in the abandoned ship 11662. Instead, he was hiding in another abandoned ship through the entrance of the abandoned ship 11662. Fortunately, the 2 ships were side by side, so there was no need to change the battle deployment. You're cunning enough. Unfortunately, you've run into us, Z7 said in a low voice with a cold smirk on his face. Let's go, brothers. This time, we're going straight to the enemy's lair. The shadows hiding in the crew room came out one by one, heading towards the entrance to the real thieves' lair. Outside, the wind and rain interweaved, and the sea surged with waves one after another. The waves hit the tall hull of the cargo ship and created waves that could make people dizzy. The waves were big, but the abandoned ship did not move or sway, as if it had taken root. They were all abandoned ships that could carry up to 400,000 tons. Now that they were stranded on the beach, they were like small islands. The waves could not move them at all. They did not enter from the abandoned ship 1162. Instead, they walked out of the abandoned ship 1162 and braved the rain to board the abandoned ship where Ku Luo Caesardin was hiding. 20 minutes later, Xia Jinyuan successfully led his team into the cabin. This time, Z7 did not follow them. Chapter 4305. Just as the intel said, Clo Caesardin was equipped with high-tech weapons. Z7, who had infiltrated the probe's database, first hacked into the other party's wireless communications. Then he silenced his own wireless communications, only receiving and not sending. Z7 controlled all the surveillance equipment on the ship to provide timely information to his comrades in the complicated cabins below, including the way to enter Clo Caesardin's lounge. The darkness before them was no longer as dim yellow lights illuminated the complicated cabins from time to time. Armed illegal militants could be seen everywhere. The Snowfield Brigade's special forces had a hard time moving forward. With every step, they had to crouch and dodge one whistle after another with the help of the infrared wall-detecting equipment. Then, with the help of the individual thermal imaging equipment, they narrowly avoided the whistles hidden in the dark. Walking in the dark, the Special Forces soldiers who were sweating profusely were all thankful for the individual combat systems they had brought with them. Without these good buddies, they would have been lucky enough to enter the cabin tonight, but they definitely wouldn't have made it out alive. Whistles, infrared sensors, and surveillance equipment were everywhere. F*CK. Do they really think they're the rulers? Z7, who had not entered the cabin but was sweating profusely as well, gritted his teeth and said, "When we get out later, we'll find a hidden surveillance equipment and 2 infrared sensors." F*CK. Do they want to be the next Pentagon? Cut the F*CK the crap and get it done, V8 said in a low voice. He was now hooked onto the cabin's pipes. Sweat dripped from the back of his neck like a water leak. Z7, whose fingers were already blurred, bit his cheeks and said, "I regret not keeping X by my side. With the 2 of us hacking the system together, we could have saved at least half the time. From cracking the firewall of the hidden surveillance equipment to blocking it, it took 8 minutes. X, who graduated from Tsinghua University's computer science department, did not say anything. He and Y had other things to do. The next step was to destroy the infrared sensor's transmission signal. Z7 was an expert at such things. He captured the frequency of the infrared sensor's signal, regenerated it, and retransmitted it through the transmitter. The hidden infrared sensor was temporarily useless. After another 5 minutes, Z7's voice was heard slowly. Done. A new round of sweat appeared on the Black Shadow's body. He held his breath and finally passed the turn. It seemed that he was about to reach the end of the cabin. 3 anchors. That's right. Turn here, and you'll reach Clo Caesardin's lounge. 3 meters forward. 2 whistles will clear the area. The 2 commandos had already taken care of the 2 hidden sentries, and the infrared light through the wall showed that there were still 2 targets waiting to be taken care of behind the wall. Let's deal with it directly. Xia Jinyuan clenched his fists and sped up. In front of him was Clo Caesardin's lounge. He had already taken 999 steps, and there was only 1 step left. He and K7 attacked at the same time. They broke the necks of the 2 whistlers that were attracted by the small commotion. Their hooked hands broke the necks of the 2 targets. Before they could come down, their comrades had already rushed forward to catch the 2 targets who had lost their breath. Then, they carried them to the side. X and Y were already squatting in front of the door to cloak Hissarden's lounge. It was a password-protected door, and not just any fingerprint or numerical password. A total of 4 sets of passwords had to be entered, and the 4 locks had to be cracked before the door could be opened. Chapter 4306. Both X and Y were top students in the computer science department. It was purely a coincidence that they entered the Snowfield Brigade. Perhaps it was because they were too young and frivolous that they entered a website that they should not have. As a result, they were targeted and kicked out of school. Half a year later, they returned to society like savages. After that, the two of them held hands and ran wildly on the military road with teary eyes. They could not stop running, and after a few years, they became unyielding Special Forces soldiers. Becoming Special Forces soldiers did not mean that their skills were wasted. On the contrary, they became more proficient with their skills year after year. There was nothing that they could not handle. The two of them stepped forward. One of them translated the calculations while the other operated the password shaft. The two of them squatted left and right, and time seemed to pass extremely slowly. After a few blinks from Xia Jinyuan's side, the green world received an OK from the two of them. It's done. Little guys, you're amazing. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Z7, who was monitoring through the screen, said with a smile. In a place where his comrades could not see, he secretly wiped his sweat. F*CK. This is too F*King nerve-wracking. It made him sweat profusely outside. As the saying goes, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Therefore, the lounge was not the final hiding place of the target, Ku Luo Caesardin. It was usually a place where Ku Luo Caesardin received his so-called generals. The reclusive Ku Luo Caesardin treasured his life. All kinds of checkpoints and defenses, in Z7's words, were designed to be as strict as the Pentagon. However, no matter how strict the security was, it did not stop the silent invasion of the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces. The moment the password door was pushed open, Y's expression changed abruptly. He saw a data cable peeking out from the edge of the password door. Z7, don't F*King talk nonsense. There's a group of independent probes inside. Y's words made everyone's expression change. Z7, who was outside, said with a smile, "It's okay. Go in boldly. Your brothers will protect you. We'll be with you." F*CK. Speak human. Thank you. Y's face contorted. Only then did he calm down. It meant that he had discovered it in advance and had already taken care of it. Xia Jinyuan, who was at the back, was so shocked by this that his back was sweating. Hearing this, he let out a sigh of relief and gestured to G3, who was also at the back, to follow them. Then, more than 10 Special Forces soldiers quickly entered the lounge. Z7's low voice came from the earpiece, telling his comrades that there was a whole other world behind the lounge. The person who provided the government with the information had a very bad conscience. The information was not even half true and half false. Other than telling the government where Klo Caesardin was hiding, everything else was F*King fake. At 9 p.m. local time in Libya, Klo Caesardin ended his call with a Western country. 3 days later, another batch of new weapons arrived at the port, and there were only 2 things he needed to do: destroy all the Chinese mines in Libya, make the Libyan government take the initiative to attack, make the Libyan mining companies unilaterally terminate their contracts, and make all the Chinese mines leave Libya. Secondly, all the minerals produced by China's mining factories in Libya in the past month will be provided. Apart from that, it would be even better if there were some documents and information. He only needed to complete these 2 tasks. Once they were done, the 2 batches of weapons that arrived at Port Sask would be immediately replenished. Ku Luo Caesardin happily agreed to cooperate. If he wanted to become the Libyan president, he needed the support of a country. It did not matter which country it was, but the prerequisite was that he had to be provided with weapons. Chapter 4307. Of course, he wouldn't let the country that supplied the weapons suffer a loss. He would work hard to maintain a cooperative relationship and eventually achieve mutual benefits. Luo Caesar waited for the arrival of the new weapons 3 days later, but he didn't know that he would never be able to guard them. Outside, a massacre was underway. This time, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade were like the Grim Reaper, taking care of Luo Caesar's bodyguards in the fastest and most brutal way possible. In the depths of the large cargo ship, sticky blood flowed all over the floor and seeped into the corners and crevices. The fallen illegal militants were all tall and strong, completely incomparable to those outside who had long arms and legs but were thin and weak. These people were all Clo Caesar's personal guards. Now, one by one, they fell to the ground, their expressions ferocious and filled with disbelief as they died with their eyes wide open. All the alarms were disabled, and the only exit was locked. There was no way to leave, not even if they shouted for help. They didn't even know how these people got to the bottom of the ship. Clear, clear, go, alert, cover the rear. Entering from the lounge, all the commands turned into hand signals. The assault team was the first to open a bloody path and kill all the way to the bottom. Z7 stared at the screen, gritting his teeth so hard that they made a grinding sound. If he hadn't infiltrated the ship in advance, he would never have guessed that the person who provided the information to the government had a backup plan. He betrayed Luo Caesar, but he was afraid that the government didn't have the ability to kill Luo Caesar. Therefore, he didn't dare to tell the truth. Other than the hiding place, everything else was fake. To the right, target 4. Adjusting the position of the camera, Z7 reported the targets he saw to the assault team one by one. Those that he couldn't see were all locked onto by the individual combat system. Xia Jinyuan and G3, who were covering the rear, took care of 2 people using infrared. When they passed a corner, Xia Jinyuan slit the throat of a guy who was in charge of the iron pipes from behind. The moment he took care of the target, a rapid, breathing sound came from a dark corner opposite the corner. At that moment, Xia Jinyuan, who realized something, quickly pulled out the pistol at his waist and fired. G3 fired faster than Xia Jinyuan. It was an illegal militant who came out of the toilet. He noticed something strange and quickly opened fire. Bang! The sudden gunshot startled everyone in the cabin. Someone shouted, "Why are there gunshots? What happened?" Now, they were at the bottom of the cabin. Through the infrared and warm-up images, they detected that there were about 50 illegal militants guarding this place. Previously, they had secretly taken care of more than half of them. In the end, they did not notice that one of them had come out from the toilet. Just like that, they were discovered, and the assassination turned into an open kill. There were no surveillance cameras installed in the toilet, so even the Z7 did not notice the person in the toilet. Xia Jinyuan's arm was bleeding. He was shot by the guy who came out of the toilet. Fortunately, the guy fired in a moment of desperation and was not accurate. The shot hit Xia Jinyuan's arm, and he only had one shot before he was finished off by G3. G3's pistol was equipped with a silencer, so it did not make much noise. The gunshot was so loud that it echoed throughout the cabin. Just like that, a bloody battle began. Fortunately, the Z7 had disabled all the alarms and probes. The heavy door that required 4 passwords to enter the bottom of the ship was also closed. As long as there were no alarms from the inside, the illegal militants outside would not know that something had happened to the heavily protected bottom of the ship. Chapter 43:08. The gunshots alerted the bodyguards who had yet to be dealt with. Chaos had yet to arise, but there was already no way to continue the assassination. The infiltrating special forces knew that something bad had happened as soon as they heard the gunshots. When they saw the alarm target, they did not panic. Instead, they signaled to each other. Then, Case 7. He leaped and rolled towards the iron bottom of the cabin and hid in a corner. He glanced up and stared at a wire. He pointed upwards and made a horizontal slicing gesture. Project X and Project Y nodded lightly. Case 7 destroyed the power line, and Project Y and Project X quickly dove forward a few meters. They didn't stop there. They dived a few meters forward, and the Special Forces soldiers beside them also dived a few meters forward. If the distance they were moving forward was a straight line, then everyone would divide this line into several sections. There would be people guarding each section, waiting for the enemy to come over, and then kill them one by one. No one asked why there was a sudden gunshot, and no one asked if anyone was injured because they had no time to ask these things. If someone was really injured or killed, they could only accept it. This was an operation with a high mortality rate. The will had already been written. If anyone did not return, the will would be sent out. Tap, tap, tap. Countless footsteps could be heard. K7, who was at the front, kept flicking his fingers into his earpiece to tell his comrades to get ready for battle. The outlaw militants who were running over noticed that the lights had gone out. They slowed down, and in the darkness the sound of bullets being loaded could be heard clearly. The gunshots alerted them, but they did not realize that the lower cabin had been invaded. After all, there had never been any outsiders here, and their leader had said that this place was even safer than the damned presidential palace in Libya. What happened up ahead? Sentinel, sentinel, someone shouted. Then someone replied, my pistol accidentally went off. Xia Jinyuan, who was panting and wrapping a bandage around his arm to stop the bleeding, could not help but laugh. If the little fox were here, she would have described it even better. His arm was hit by a pistol bullet, but it did not penetrate through. The bullet was still lodged in his muscles. Even if he lifted his arm slightly, the pain would cause his muscles to tighten. Perhaps because he thought of Yi Qian, Xia Jinyuan inexplicably felt that the pain seemed to lessen a lot. This was a bloody battle, and even a bloody battle with a high mortality rate. Even as the leader, he did not know if he could leave this place alive. Klo Kaisardan, a leader of the outlaw militants in Libya, but he was definitely not a nobody. Klo, and with. How? G3 asked in a low voice. There was a strong smell of blood on his body, both his and the enemy's. His painted face was stained with blood, and even his 2 eyebrows were stuck with blood. They were stiff, like 2 stiff eyebrows drawn by the clumsiest makeup artist. Xia Jinyuan finished the last step of the bandage with his teeth. He smiled coldly and said, you can carry on until you leave here alive. Have you finished clearing them? Of course. There aren't many left. G3 curled his lips, and a cold smile appeared in his eyes. The air in the lower cabin was getting worse, and the sticky smell of blood filled every corner. The fight had already begun. The outlaw militants who had entered the ambush circle of the Special Forces finally realized that their place had been invaded. Chapter 4309. Violent roars filled the entire lower deck. The illegal militants realized that someone had infiltrated the lower deck and killed their comrades, so they started to fight back. Someone tried to open fire, but no one gave him a chance. The dim lights all went out, and they lost their sense of direction. They were quietly taken care of in the dark. Don't give them too many chances to open fire. The king of the Snowfield Brigade gave his order. He didn't like to fight head-on, and he didn't like to see his comrades sacrificing themselves for the sake of the battle. He didn't like this kind of brainless battle at all. He preferred to preserve his strength so that he could complete the mission in the shortest amount of time possible. He would hide and watch his surroundings. He would quietly take out one target after another, eliminating the potential threats in the shortest amount of time possible so that he could complete the mission as soon as possible. Now that he had been discovered, there was no need to reveal himself. The enemy was in the open, and he was in the dark. He had the advantage, so he had to make good use of it before quietly taking out the targets that were coming out like headless flies. Ugh, someone in the dark struggled in pain. He wanted to break free and breathe loudly. Crack! The sound of a cervical vertebra breaking was heard, and the person who was still trying to break free fell to the ground with his head in a strange position. His face, back, and buttocks were facing up, but the back of his head and chest were facing down. Obviously, someone had twisted his head in a different direction. The Snowfield Brigade completed the last wave of assassinations. Next, they took out their pistols and started the first wave of direct fire. Bang, 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 bang. The gunshots rang out. The illegal militants who had heard the sound didn't have time to open fire. They were either hit in the head or the chest. They rushed out as fast as they could, but they were quickly taken out by the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade. Z7 became very busy. He split the probes in the lower deck into several small screens. Through the people coming and going on the screens, he quickly reported to his comrades where the targets were moving and where the targets were hiding. This allowed his comrades to react quickly and complete the elimination. One by one, the silhouettes on the small screens turned into their comrades. When they locked onto the small screen in the middle, 3 silhouettes suddenly turned back. Z7 instantly realized what was going on. He said to K7, who hadn't shown himself yet, "Brother, it's your turn. Walk 3 meters forward and turn right." K7 didn't say anything. Instead, he used his actions to show Z7 that he understood. Z7's voice through the earpiece was no longer as friendly as before. Instead, it was cold and menacing. "Follow them. We'll be able to find the target. XY, you two cover K7. Xia Jinyuan's cold and bloodthirsty voice reached the ears of all his comrades. With his arm bandaged casually, he joined the battle and began the bloodiest purge. The lower cabin was the lowest level of the cargo ship, and it was also Cloak Hissarden's personal area of activity at night. Without his orders, no one was allowed to approach. Now that the power supply had been completely destroyed, the lower cabin had become an isolated world. The illegal militants above did not know the situation below, and the illegal militants below could not call for help from above. They were like turtles in a jar, being dealt with one after another. Gunshots rang out. The special forces took the last chance to assassinate another 8 people. There was no way to assassinate the rest, so they could only shoot at the targets they found. There weren't many, only about 7 to 8 people left, including the 3 who had retreated to report to Ku Luo Caesardin. Chapter 43:10. Ku Luo Caesardin opened the large-caliber eagle rifle beside his desk and walked to the door. At the same time, he put his ear close to the door to listen to the commotion outside. There were gunshots outside, but they were short-lived. After a few shots, everything returned to normal. However, even a few gunshots were enough to make Ku Luo Caesardin's heart sink. How could there be gunshots in his room? Without hesitation, Ku Luo Caesardin immediately locked the round steel hatch. Then, in the dark, he walked to the cabinet, opened it, and quickly changed his clothes. It was a complete set of diving equipment, enough for Ku Luo Caesardin to escape by jumping into the sea. Outside, 3 illegal militants knocked on the hatch anxiously while shouting. Even though Ku Luo Caesardin couldn't hear what his subordinates were saying, the banging sounds made his face darken. Stupid things. Were they trying to let the people who had infiltrated the lower cabin to kill him know where he was? A bunch of D*Ned stupid things. With a gloomy face, Ku Luo Caesardin could only curse in his heart. His hands didn't stop moving. In less than 3 minutes, he put on the diving suit, put on the oxygen mask, carried the oxygen tank, and held the flippers in his hands. He skillfully rushed to the right side of the main cabin. There was a door there, and after opening the door, there was a dense collection of pipes. There were sewer pipes, cable pipes, communication pipes, and so on. This was the bottommost layer of the entire cargo hold. If they walked further, they would reach the drainage port. Through the drainage port, they could directly enter the sea and leave. The aqua regia was poured onto the round hatch. The tightly shut hatch was impenetrable. Under the corrosive effects of the aqua regia, a gap appeared little by little, corroding the latch as well. K7 kicked the hatch open. Through the night vision goggles, there was no one in the cabin. There was only a pile of clothes scattered beside a cabinet in the corner. Project X rushed forward to pick up the clothes. His body temperature is still there. He couldn't have escaped for more than 3 minutes. Here, I found a small, tightly shut door. It was very short, and required him to bend down to enter. With a tense expression, he pulled it again and again, only to find it locked from the outside. The entrance to the drainage pipe. He wanted to escape through the drainage pipe. The clothes that he took off showed that he had changed into a diving suit. Why said as he used the aqua regia again. This time, the aqua regia was more useful than bullets. Bullets could not penetrate the thick steel door in a short time, but the highly corrosive aqua regia could do it. Q King, Kulo Caesared in, is planning to escape through the drainage. K7 reported the news. Then, the sound of running came from outside. His comrades who had cleared all the targets outside rushed over. It was already the most critical moment. How could they let him escape? E6, E6, the target is preparing to escape through the drain. Head to the drain to kill him. Z7, continue your wireless shielding. Xia Jinyuan, whose face was as cold as a thick layer of ice, adjusted the deployment. Next, all of them would leave through the drainage outlet, so the plan to retreat by the original route was canceled. Got it. E6, who was at the vantage point, put away his AMR. Even with the AMR weighing more than 10 kilograms, his steps were still light and quick. It did not look like he was running while carrying an AMR weighing more than 10 kilograms. The small door was successfully opened. The 3 Special Forces soldiers in action rushed in first. Then, their comrades followed in succession. The 2 comrades in charge of guarding the rear were the last to leave. Chapter 43:11. The sound of footsteps could be heard from the front. It wasn't loud, but it was very clear. It was the sound of running footsteps. His voice roused everyone's spirits. Split into 3 groups and charged straight ahead. Xia Jinyuan waved his hand, and the 13 members quickly split into 3 groups. As the captain, he rushed to the front. Although there was still a bullet in his arm, he was still very fast. Blood had already dyed the white bandage red, but Xia Jinyuan had no time to care. He only had one goal now, to kill Kulo Caesared in. Kulo Caesared in heard the footsteps behind him. This cunning illegal militant didn't panic. In the darkness, he even had a cruel smile on his face. 2 grenades were thrown out, and the sound of them rolling could be heard. Xia Jinyuan, who was at the front, had a sudden change in expression. He shouted, "Grenades, get out of the way!" Boom, boom. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of an explosion followed by a fireball shook the entire bottom of the cargo ship. The power of the fireball and the grenade was like the fire from the depths of hell, bringing with it a power that could easily destroy lives. The shrapnel splashed in all directions, some embedded in the pipes, some scattered in every corner, and some were swept up by the airwaves to the Special Forces soldiers who had dodged. The sharp shrapnel scratched the back of his hand, leaving a bloody gash. This was the lightest injury one could get from a grenade explosion. It was only a small wound. The cargo ship was too heavy. The threat of 2 grenades wasn't enough to shake it, but the sound was still powerful. The illegal militants on the bottom deck seemed to have heard the sound of drums from below. It was very deep and muffled. The sound was enough to alarm the patrolling personnel, who immediately reported the news. Then, the illegal militants on top moved. The Special Forces soldier of the Snowfield Brigade dodged to the side. Before the smoke dissipated, Xia Jinyuan, whose ear had been grazed by shrapnel, had already gotten up. He listened to the footsteps in front of him closely. "Let's go," G3 shouted in a low voice. He held his gun and chased after Xia Jinyuan's footsteps. Kulo Caesared in, who was getting closer and closer to the drainage outlet, heard footsteps again. Not far behind him, someone was chasing him at a speed that made his heart sink. "Son of a bitch." He cursed, but he didn't stop, nor did he throw another grenade. He didn't have any more grenades. He only had a handgun on him now. He didn't even bring a large caliber rifle, because he was afraid that it would affect his escape speed. Now, he realized that he had made a huge mistake when he escaped. He should not have only thought about escaping, but also thought about bringing a rifle with him so that he could use it to fight back in an emergency. He didn't even have the chance to make up for his mistake. He could only charge forward. He even threw the oxygen tank to the side as it clanged incessantly. Without the oxygen tank, Kulo Caesar-din ran much faster. Xia Jinyuan, who had caught up, had already seen the running figure. He holstered his pistol and quickly switched to a rifle. Through the laser sight, a red dot fell behind the figure. Bang, the 7.2 mm bullet from the Type 95 rifle hit the figure. The fleeing figure staggered and fell to the ground. The drainage outlet that allowed Kulo Caesar-din to escape was just inches away. He could even hear the sound of the waves and the pouring rain outside. Chapter 43:12. At the same time, the illegal militants realized that all their walkie-talkies had lost their functions. They tried to contact the people below, but the walkie-talkies were silent. There wasn't even the slightest buzzing sound. Something's wrong. Something must have happened down there. They all knew that something had happened down there, but they had no way to go down. The hatch that required a password to enter was blocking their way. They knew that something had happened down there, but there was nothing they could do. Z7 put away all his equipment and quickly approached his comrades. They retreated from the drain and left from the end of the port, avoiding Kulo Caesar-din's important sentries until they left the port. The waves were very big. Xia Jinyuan's injured arm was immediately irritated by the seawater as he jumped down from the drain. He couldn't help but purse his thin lips. How could the wound not hurt when salt was poured on it? The pain would only last for a while. The codename Operation Sandstorm was successfully completed. No comrades were sacrificed. The endless darkness swallowed up a dozen figures. The intertwining wind and rain covered the sound of clapping. Footprints were left on the beach. The footprints left behind by the waves disappeared without a trace. Kulo Caesar-din, one of the leaders of the illegal organization that had been captured by the Libyan government forces for more than 10 years, was now lying less than a meter away from a spit. Blood dripped out of the spit, one drop after another, dripping into the surging sea current. Inside the abandoned cargo ship, the hatch that was installed with a password was shot by bullets. There were countless densely packed holes on it, but the hatch was still tightly shut. There was no way to break it open. The illegal militants outside were already searching everywhere. They chased and ran in the rain. When the power supply was destroyed, they used strong flashlights to illuminate the area. In the end, other than finding countless of their comrades who had been killed, they didn't find anything else. They looked up at the sea and around the port. It was pitch black everywhere. Other than the sound of the wind, rain, and waves, they couldn't even hear the roars of their own people. After an unknown period of time, the damaged backup power supply was finally fixed. The technicians hired by Kulo Caesar-din to oversee the abandoned ship were finally able to restart the computer. However, they found that all the data in the bottom cabin had been destroyed. There was no way for them to know what had happened in the bottom cabin through the database. Looking at their firewall, they knew that it had been breached. The other party had erased all traces before leaving, so there was no way for them to capture the data and find out who had hacked the database. At 11 p.m. local time in Libya, the technicians, who had spent more than 2 hours, finally managed to decipher the 4 passwords of the door. The moment the hatch was opened, the smell of blood rushed out. Blood flowed like a river inside. Countless illegal militants on the ground, as if they had been killed by a monster under the sea. Not a single one was left. They found Kulo Caesar-din Libya. Kulo Caesar-din's brother, the leader of the illegal militants. Kulo Caesar-din's brother, who was Caesar-din Caesar-din's. Kulo Caesar-din Libya. Ked. The muscles are strong enough. You're lucky that you didn't injure your nerves. K7, who had picked out the bullet, said calmly. Faced with a bloody wound, he didn't even raise his eyebrows. From the beginning of the debridement to the end of the suture, everything was done in one go. Chapter 43:13. They had already left the port and walked for nearly 2 hours in the rain before they found a shelter to treat their wounds. This time, the only one who was shot was Xia Jinyuan. Other than that, The rest of the wounds were just abrasions. They immediately disinfected them and didn't even need to bandage them. Before they finished bandaging their wounds, Z7 walked over and said in a low voice, "The boss is looking for you." Major General Yang's voice came from the headset. It was a private conversation, and not all the Special Forces soldiers could hear it. There's an accident in a Chinese mine that produces important materials. 12 Chinese employees and 64 local Libyan employees are under the control of illegal militants. A team of brothers that you're familiar with has already rushed over to rescue them. 76 hostages needed to be rescued. Xia Jinyuan's eyes were cold. He asked, "Are there any casualties?" "We haven't received any information yet. The other party has blocked all communications in the mine. Even if there is..." Major General Yang sighed softly and hid his unfinished words. He changed the topic and said, "Because there are more hostages, the peacekeepers who returned to the camp to report said that there are more illegal militants with sophisticated weapons. For safety's sake, you have to go over and support them." Major General Yang was the first to know that Ku Luo Caesardin was successfully killed. At the same time, he also learned about the situation of the Special Forces soldiers who carried out the mission in detail. The death rate of the desert operation was 0. Major General Yang, who was waiting for news in China, felt a surge of excitement when he heard the news. "Good job. Good Chinese man." Major General Yang gave the order again. He considered the situation of all his soldiers. If possible, he would like to let the soldiers he was proud of rest well. However, this was just his imagination. After listening, Xia Jinyuan glanced at the bandaged wounds and replied, "We can do another mission. I don't know which brother company it is. Can you contact them?" Major General Yang replied, "The Storm Commandos. They're all acquaintances who have trained together." The young officer's voice was full of energy. It was a little arrogant and cold, but more than that, it was the confidence of a soldier. It was reassuring. Xia Jinyuan, who had been leaning against the chair, suddenly became excited. He mouthed the words "new job" to his brothers, who were looking at him. With a solemn expression, he replied, "It's been a long time since we worked with them. Give us the address of the mine, and we'll act immediately." Major General Yang reported the location of the mining factory, and Xia Jinyuan relayed it to Z7. After a few keystrokes, Z7 knew the exact location of the mining factory. He stared at Xia Jinyuan, who was carrying military equipment, and narrowed his eyes. He asked, "Other than the hostage rescue, are there any other instructions? What was so valuable about a mine in the depths of the rainforest that the illegal militants had to go to?" Moreover, the news about the mine had been blocked. "Blow up the mine, including the equipment that wasn't moved in time." "Got it." Xia Jinyuan thought that the call was over, but to his surprise, Major General Yang suddenly threw a bomb at him, making Xia Jinyuan wonder if he had misheard. "Qing Miao? You said that Qing Miao is with the Demon King now? She's on a mission with the water ghosts?" Not long ago, he was still thinking about Little Fox. Now he was directly told that the girl he was thinking about was also in Libya, and she was on a mission with the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos, who were about to meet up with them. This news made Xia Jinyuan, who had always been calm, lose his composure. "What are you waiting for? Let's go, let's go." The girl who should be studying in China is actually out on a mission again, and she's even fighting side by side with the water ghosts who have tried to kidnap her time and time again. "Brothers from the Navy, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking for Qing Miao from the Army?" Chapter 43:14. T6's eyes widened, and 2 words were written in his eyes. The word liar was written in his left eye, and the word human was written in his right eye. How was that possible? Qing Miao. That was Qing Miao, the Qing Miao of the army, the Qing Miao of the Snowfield Brigade. How could she possibly fight alongside a group of Navy soldiers in blue and white camouflage uniforms? How is that possible? They were not even from the same military. How is that possible? Could it be that Qing Miao was really poached by the Navy, who likes to poach people? V8, who also clearly did not believe it and felt that it was unbelievable, voiced out his worries. Someone immediately smacked his head. Since he was wearing a helmet, it did not hurt, but he stumbled a step forward from the impact. He heard his captain say, "Is Qing Niao the kind of soldier who could be easily poached?" She really was not. Xia Jinyuan's words calmed the soldier's morale. G3 said solemnly, "We only have 12 employees, and there are 64 Libyan employees." Did the boss say what arrangements the Libyan government has made? This was what G3 was concerned about. As for whether Qing Niao had been poached by the Navy, well, the captain said that Qing Niao was not the kind of female soldier who could be easily poached. Everyone was relieved when they heard that. Xia Jinyuan, who was putting on his combat uniform again, said calmly, "The boss did not say anything. It seems that the Libyan government has made no arrangements. Now that the situation is starting to get out of control again, the government forces will not specially send troops to rescue the 64 Libyan employees. The boss knows this very well, which is why he sent us to provide support. Save as many of the Libyan employees as possible. We have to save all of the Chinese employees." This was how war was. As soldiers, they were not God or Mother Mary. They would rescue the Libyan employees, but the premise was that they would only take action if they could ensure the safety of the Chinese employees. It could be said that it was cruel or heartless, but this was reality. There was no such thing as mercy on the battlefield. Sometimes humanity could not even be considered. It was the law of the jungle. If one really wanted to settle the score, one could only say that the country was weak and incompetent. Major General Yang did not mention the rescue of the Libyan employees. He only told Xia Jinyuan exactly how many Libyan employees there were and provided only a number. As for how to judge, he believed that the king of the Snowfield Brigade would make his own decision. Once the order was issued, all the combat power was handed over to Xia Jinyuan, who was in charge of the battle. Even as a superior, he had no right to interfere at will. Xia Jinyuan's words made the young Special Forces soldiers fall into a short silence. They gripped their guns tighter and tighter, as if they were venting their emotions in secret. 64 hostages. The Libyan government had not taken any rescue measures. As soldiers, they deeply felt the sorrow of a country. A weak and incompetent country. This is a weak and incompetent country. China used to be like this as well. But today, the Chinese side had slowly stood up, straightening their backs that were once bent. If they fell behind, they would be beaten. This had never changed since time immemorial. The rain was still falling. The tireless special forces of the Snowfield Brigade, led by Captain Xia Jinyuan, once again embarked on a journey. This was a declaration of war against evil forces. It told those with bad intentions that China was no longer the country that had to be careful even in a war of words, and was afraid of offending powerful countries. China, with its back straight, would use practical actions to tell the illegal militants and the forces behind them that China had risen. Chapter 43:15. The rain washed over the war-ravaged city. In the dark, women hugged children, and the elderly guarded their broken homes. From time to time, they would wake up from their dreams full of fear, and only after a long time could they close their eyes. In a war-torn country, even sleeping had become a luxury for the civilians. Tonight was destined to be a restless night. The Libyan government was already very busy. As for the 64 mine workers who had been kidnapped by illegal militants, the Libyan government said that they could do nothing about the situation. The mine workers were controlled by illegal militants, and the Chinese side had sent troops to rescue them. The Libyan government had not made a move so far. The Chinese side had been communicating with the Libyan government, hoping that the Libyan government could provide help to the peacekeeping soldiers that the Chinese side sent to rescue them. They could only say that they were peacekeeping soldiers, not that the Chinese side had sent troops. After several rounds of communication, the Libyan government's reply was still powerless. They really wanted to send troops to rescue the Libyan employees, but they really did not have extra troops to rescue the 64 Libyan employees who did not listen to the arrangements. Helplessly, they told the Chinese side clearly, They will do their best to protect the Libyan civilians. They need to protect the Libyan civilians in the city of Jenny, the town of Cowell, the capital of Libya, and the Libyan civilians in the various states. They can only painfully choose to give up on the Libyan civilians who do not obey the arrangements. Yes, they clearly told the Chinese side that they had given up on the 64 employees. It was not just painful words, but it was truly painful. Major General Yang could hear the pain in the heart of the Libyan government's senior military officer. Even his voice was engraved with grief and sorrow. He wanted to protect the Libyan citizens, but sometimes reality forced him to make the most helpless and painful choice. They were powerless. They were truly powerless. After many failed attempts to communicate, Major General Yang hung up the phone. The blue veins on the back of his hand were popping out. He spoke to the Navy commander and told him the Libyan government's decision. He clearly heard the sound of a folder being thrown out of the phone. It's fine if they don't know how to rescue them, but they can't even provide transportation. They have completely pinned their hopes on our soldiers. Old Yang, those are the soldiers that we have carefully trained. King. I haven't slept a wink since I was worried that something might have happened to them. Ever since the water demons of the Storm Commandos went abroad to carry out their mission, the Navy commander hadn't slept a wink. No matter how tired he was, he would only close his eyes for a short while before immediately waking up. The soldiers that were sent out were all elites that had been polished for several years. Furthermore, they were the Navy's first batch of amphibious frogman special forces. All of them were the hopes of powerful countries, hoping that after they came out, they would be able to nurture generations of special forces for the Navy. Even if one of them had an accident, it would be like digging out the heart of the Marine commander. Major General Yang could understand the feelings of the Navy commander very well. He felt the same way. He sighed and said, "Old Dong, calm down. They're indeed powerless on their side. As for us, we will not be the good old gentlemen. We will definitely save all the Chinese employees, and then we will save the Libyan employees. If we can save them, we will. Get in touch with your soldiers and tell them that a company of brothers from our army that had fought with them before is rushing over. If we join forces, I won't be afraid that we won't be able to kill those bastards." Chapter 43:16. Did Liu Bing also send other troops? They even fought together with the Storm Commandos before. The angry Navy commander immediately said, "Okay, I'll contact them right away. Old Yang, we have to let them communicate with each other. They can't act alone." Well, that's what I was thinking. Next, we'll wait for the news from the front line. It was not easy to let two different military forces with different wireless electronic systems communicate with each other. It took nearly 20 minutes for the Navy commander to contact Li Jinyan. The first thing he said was, "There's a group of army brothers that you're familiar with and have fought together with before heading to the mine." Li Jinyan, who was drenched by the rain, heard this, and a familiar face flashed in his mind. His future brother-in-law, Xia Jinyuan. The only army brothers that had fought together with him were his troops. Then, the Navy commander talked about the rescue of the Libyan employees. It was still the same words. If they could save them, they would. If they couldn't, they had to give up. "Devil, you're a Chinese soldier. The country didn't train you to send you to your deaths. Remember your mission and your responsibilities. I don't want to see a good old man in your team. Do you understand?" The military commander's kind and extremely cold voice entered Li Jinyan's ears. In exchange, Li Jinyan answered calmly, "Understood." His sonorous and powerful voice made the Navy commander feel relieved. The soldiers that he had brought up were all good and had never disappointed him. Just listen. He didn't need to explain everything to understand. Li Jinyan had never thought of rescuing all 64 Libyan employees from the beginning. The more people there were, the more chances of being exposed. He had to give up some. Even if he contacted Xia Jinyuan now, he still didn't think of rescuing all the Libyan employees. However, he would try his best to provide opportunities for the Libyan employees to leave. If the situation allowed, they could kill all the illegal militants that controlled the mine, then everyone would be happy. It had been a long time since the peacekeepers hid the car. The car was still there and hadn't been stolen. It was just waiting for them to go over. The car was still there, and the Brotherhood Company had contacted the rescue team. These two pieces of good news made a faint smile appear in Li Jinyan's cold eyes. He told his comrades the good news that the Brotherhood Company had joined forces. Instantly, the torrential rain couldn't hide the water demon's joy. The Brotherhood Company, haha, they knew which Brotherhood Company it was. It was the mysterious and powerful Brotherhood Company that they still didn't know their unit number. The water demons were purely happy that the Brotherhood Company had joined forces. They were even more confident that they could complete the mission. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu sent news that there were two groups of illegal militants heading to the mine. At the same time, there were at least 20 foreign faces who were wearing military uniforms of various brands. They seemed to be mercenaries. Those who could become mercenaries were mostly veterans who had survived the battlefield. All of them were ruthless and had strong battle tactics. With the addition of mercenaries, it would undoubtedly be even more troublesome. The water demons of the storm commandos knew that the bones were getting harder and harder to chew. If they did not chew them well, they might even lose their lives. Everyone knew in their hearts, but no one backed down and continued to march. Now that the Brotherhood Company had arrived, and it was the Brotherhood Company that they admired so much. Ha ha! There was really nothing to be afraid of. No matter how hard the bone was to chew, they would chew it. Chapter 43:17. The water ghouls were happy, and so was Yi Qian. Apart from that, she was also very shocked. After going around in circles, she was back to fighting alongside Captain Xia again, reuniting on the battlefield in a foreign country. Sure enough, her relationship with Captain Xia was different from the rest. How many couples would be like them? Reuniting on the battlefield in a foreign country. Her face, which was a little pale and even a little wrinkled from the rain, had a bright smile on it. She was looking forward to meeting Captain Xia again. Both parties entered the wireless communication system and knew each other's wireless codes. They only needed to reconstruct a set of data and rewrite their communication codes to establish a connection. Finally, they would be able to communicate successfully after completing the bridge. In just 15 minutes, the Brotherhood Company's voices could be heard through their respective earpieces. The Storm Commandos water ghouls were not the only ones who were happy. Similarly, the Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade were also very happy. There was a fierce battle ahead of them, but it did not affect the joy between the special forces of the two different armed forces. Xia Jinyuan did not speak to Yi Qian immediately. As the captain, he first spoke to Li Jinyan alone. The two of them needed to communicate before they could share information. The two captains had a serious conversation alone. Meanwhile, their comrades had already said a lot in the established public channel. Yi Qian listened first and did not say anything until the T6 combatant of the Snowfield Brigade said, "Qing Niao, are you not saying anything because you know you've let us down? Is that why you don't dare to say anything? Or do you think we don't know you're in the Navy now? You're clearly in the Army. How can you run over to the Navy? Are you abandoning us Army brothers?" The topic of conversation shifted to Yi Qian. As the only female soldier in both teams, there was always more to talk about, and it was always the central point. Yi Qian pursed her lips and laughed when she heard this. Before she could say anything, the water ghouls had already spoken for her. Yes, Qing Yao already has thoughts of abandoning all of you. We will continue to work hard and make her completely leave the Army and transfer to the Navy to become our comrade. You guys better be mentally prepared. Qing Yao is going to be transferred to the military soon. Qing Yao, don't talk to them. They will bully you. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos all wanted Yi Qian to join their team. However, poaching people would ruin their reputation, so they kept it to themselves and did not say it out loud. But now, the matter that they had been holding back had been exposed by one of their brothers. This was simply a heaven-sent opportunity, allowing them to speak openly about it. The pitiful T6 combatant had been knocked on the head and kicked in the calf. He was being bullied like a little girl. Don't you know how to speak? Don't you know how to speak? If you don't know how to speak, then shut up. The water ghosts had been holding back their words, but now that he had blurted it out, they really wanted to give him a tight slap. Knowing that he had committed an unforgivable crime, the T6 combatant hurriedly tried to make up for it. He chuckled and said, "It's not up to you guys to decide. You'll have to Qing Miao to decide. Calling Qing Miao. Calling Qing Miao. Please remember that you are an army soldier." "Thank you." Yi Qian, who had been called out, said, "Long time no see, brothers. It had indeed been a long time since they last met. The last time they worked together with their comrades in the Snowfield Brigade was a year ago, when Xia Jinyuan ended the call with Li Jinyan and switched back to the public channel. It was extremely lively. From time to time, he could even hear his girl's soft laughter. Chapter 43:18. Hearing Yi Qian's light, wind-like laughter, Xia Jinyuan did not immediately speak. Instead, he listened quietly. In his mind, he had already painted her face bit by bit. She really seemed to be standing in front of him with a smile. He had already caressed her face thousands of times in his heart. They had not been separated for long, and he did not expect to meet again so soon. Moreover, they were reunited on the battlefield. With her by his side, the tiredness from fighting through the night and rushing through the rain seemed to have disappeared. He only hoped that he would be able to see her again soon. His girl could still smile. Her mental fortitude was really good. Just now, he had a short conversation with the Demon King. Both of them had a rough idea of the rescue mission. The Demon King had even told him that he was prepared to sacrifice himself for this mission. Mercenaries, illegal armed forces, and hostages to cover the retreat were all extremely dangerous. Sacrificing himself was not an excessive thought, and his girl could be said to be the most experienced soldier out of the 15 of them. She had to be very clear about the situation at the front line. However, when faced with the possibility of sacrificing herself, she still smiled like a gentle spring breeze, without a trace of gloominess. His girl was already considered a veteran. Xia Jinyuan did not speak. Li Jinyan did not speak either. Their comrades from different branches of the military mistakenly thought that they were still communicating. Yi Qian also thought so. It was only when Li Jinyan spoke that she realized they had been eavesdropping on the public channel for a long time. "Q King, after eavesdropping for so long, it's time to hurry up with your soldiers." When his brother-in-law spoke, his brother-in-law, Xia Jinyuan, facepalmed. Sigh. Even though his identity had been recognized, his brother-in-law was still that difficult brother-in-law who was cheerfully dragging him down. When Yi Qian heard this, her smile immediately stopped. For some reason, her cheeks that had been washed white by the rain had a faint pink color, as if she was anticipating something. There was also an undetectable sweetness and shyness in her eyes. In the eyes of her comrades, she was a top-notch female soldier. However, in the eyes of the man she loved deeply, she was still that girl who needed his protection. The two of them were standing in the same country and were less than 50 kilometers apart. However, their hearts were already close to each other when they found out that the other was here. Even if they did not take the initiative to greet each other, they knew what the other was thinking. When Xia Jinyuan heard her suddenly stop laughing, he knew that his girl was shy and avoided arousing suspicion again. In the face of so many comrades who fought side by side with him, this boyfriend of his was not just a boyfriend, but a team leader. Xia Jinyuan cleared his throat and said with a faint smile, "After chatting for so long, isn't it time to go? It's up to you to get the Qing Yao back. I can't bear for Qing Yao to leave our team." The last two sentences had a deeper meaning. The T6, G3, and other comrades who knew the relationship between the two of them had already started laughing. Look at their captain. His sweet talk was so smooth and dignified. With his EQ, it was no wonder that he could capture Qing Yao's heart. His EQ was really high. At that moment, the comrades who knew the truth felt an inexplicable sweetness in their hearts. It was as if they had fallen in love and said sweet words to each other. It was so sweet that they felt peace deep in their hearts. It was not that they did not love, nor that they did not want to love, but the love they were waiting for was not the sweetness of men and women in the world. Other than sweetness, their love had a different kind of bloodshed. This was enough to make them hesitate and not dare to take a step forward, for fear that they would let their love down. Chapter 43:19. It wasn't that they didn't love or didn't want to love, but they were afraid of love, even though they weren't afraid of death. They longed to be loved, longed to have love, but were also afraid of being loved, afraid that it would be an empty dream. They became cowards who were afraid of meeting love, and all the bachelors in the team were like that. However, the love between Q King and Xing Niao made them see a different kind of sweetness, and the cowards dared to love again. Even if the journey was bloody, as long as she was by his side, he would feel happy. Listening to Xia Jinyuan's words of love, V8, Z7, and the other comrades smiled deeply. The comrades who didn't know about the relationship between the two, such as X, Y, and the water demons and the storm commandos, all thought that he was worried that Xing Niao would join the storm commandos. Immediately, a Special Forces soldier from the Snowfield Brigade patted his chest and said, "Captain, we promise to complete the mission. We promise that Xing Niao won't join the Brotherhood and will follow Captain wholeheartedly." Follow Captain wholeheartedly? Xia Jinyuan liked hearing that. The water demons didn't like hearing that, and the channel was filled with TSK tisk, sounds to express their dissatisfaction. Whether or not we can make Xing Niao wholeheartedly follow me, the captain, will depend on us brothers. Li Jinyan turned off the microphone and listened to the guy's arrogant voice as he said to Yi Qian, "If I beat him up one day, don't feel bad. He's asking for a beating." Flirting in front of her brother. What else could it be other than asking for a beating? Yi Qian, whose face was so red that his complexion became better, turned off the microphone and replied, "You guys go ahead, I won't be able to see it at school." He was obviously protecting Xia Jinyuan. As the older brother, Li Jinyan's heart was boiling with jealousy. He was so protective, so protective. His heart ached. Even if he had to beat up Xia Jinyuan in the future, he didn't plan to tell his younger sister a single word, lest his younger sister side with Xia Jinyuan again and make him feel sad. After flirting with her, Xia Jinyuan stopped. His girlfriend was shy, and her brother was fierce, protective, and narrow-minded. In order not to be anxious in the future, he had to stop here. "All right, brothers, we've talked and laughed. The time to relax is over. Now let's focus and talk about how we should meet up as soon as possible. Traveling by foot is a waste of time. We have to find a way to get a car." When it came to the mission, the public channel, which had been filled with laughter a second ago, instantly fell silent. Yi Qian also put away his daughter's thoughts. His expression became exceptionally cold, and his picturesque eyes were filled with killing intent. I just looked at the distance. After you find a car, you can get close to the periphery of the mine in half an hour. If we don't have a car, even if we run all the way, it will take us about 3 hours to get there. It's too long. Walking is not advisable. If they wanted to meet up as soon as possible, they had to get a car. We'll deal with the matter of getting the car ourselves. Demon King, you guys go over and check the surroundings. See if you can send a few people in and report the situation inside. After you sneak in, don't be in a hurry to move. Once you find a breakthrough point, we'll work together from the inside and outside to complete the strangulation. An operation team had its own combat deployment. Now that they had 2 operations teams, they could deploy boldly with sufficient manpower. Li Jinyan said, 2 peacekeepers have already snuck into the mine. The enemy has blocked the entire mine wirelessly, so we can't send any effective information in time. We'll go over and meet up with the 2 squads of peacekeepers first, then sneak into the mine. If the situation changes, we'll take action in advance. You guys will be responsible for providing backup and completing the hostage escort. Chapter 43:20. What he meant was that the Storm Commandos would charge first. If the situation went out of control and the enemy's firepower was too strong, there was no need for them to come back. They would retreat quickly to prevent further sacrifices. Hearing this, Xia Jinyuan said, "Brothers, wait for us. When the situation is stable, we'll take a detour. Hide well and don't show our faces. If we do, we'll be killed in one shot. None of us will be in danger. We have to go back alive. We didn't come here to be sacrificed. The bone is hard to chew. Let's crush it first." Xia Jinyuan was a natural battlefield commander. He had led his troops many times, but he had never chosen to fight head-on. He would never choose to fight head-on with his hot-bloodedness. He would choose to fight head-on and fight his way out with the determination to die. He believed that it was a stupid battle that the commander came up with because of his brain. The reason why he liked to assassinate and kill the enemy quietly was because he could control the situation in advance and understand the enemy's layout. He liked to lead his comrades to attack in the dark, and he could be as ruthless as possible. Therefore, he would not allow the situation that Demon King Li had described to happen. Since they were going to provide reinforcements, his comrades and brothers had to return home alive. "Wait for us, brothers. We came here together, so we have to go back together. Not one of us can be left behind." This was Xia Jinyuan's promise. Yi Qian knew that the man she loved deeply was a man of his words. The rain hit the leaves with a swooshing sound. Lightning flashed across the horizon, briefly illuminating the dark clouds in the sky. The truck without lights bumped and bumped. The wheels ran over the muddy road, splashing yellow mud everywhere. It drove forward in the darkness, like the mouth of a giant beast. Yi Qian, who was sitting in the passenger seat, stared straight ahead. She deliberately slowed down her blinking speed. She was as alert as a leopard, not missing a single movement. Half an hour later, the truck stopped moving and drove off the muddy road into the rainforest. They covered up the tire tracks that they had left behind and retreated. On the other side, Xia Jinyuan entered the barracks of the government army stationed in Yeni City. He drove away with a truck and reloaded his grenades through friendly communication. Under the friendly gaze of the lieutenant colonel who provided the vehicle and grenades, Xia Jinyuan drove away with his team members. The Chinese side communicated with the Libyan government again and finally obtained a truck for the Snowfield Brigade, while Xia Jinyuan obtained the best weapon for self-defense, grenades. With a car and a grenade, it was not an exaggeration to say that they had taken a detour in the end. However, they also realized that they had lost contact with the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos. Needless to say, they must have already entered the mine. Li Jinyin and the others found the place where the peacekeepers were hiding and gave the peacekeepers a fright. The peacekeepers, who had lost contact with the outside world, did not know that reinforcements had arrived. They only found out when they got close to them. How could they not be shocked? Our brothers who went in didn't come out. The signal is blocked, so we can't know what's going on inside. So far, 3 groups of illegal militants have entered the mine and set up sentries around it. The peacekeepers who were squatting there told their brothers who came to support the situation one by one. Meanwhile, the Xia sped up to decipher the other party's wireless communication and then completed the communication system for his own people. 10 minutes later, the 2 teams regained communication. At the same time, the 2 peacekeepers who had sneaked into the mine sent out the latest news. The illegal militants interrogated the employees of the mine and the factory, trying to find out where the special materials were flowing to. So far, there were no casualties among the Chinese hostages, but there were Libyan employees. Chapter 43:21. The Chinese employees chose to cooperate and negotiate, while the Libyan employees, who had been destroyed by the war, chose to escape. They did not believe that the government forces would come to save them, nor did they believe the nonsense that they would be released as long as they cooperated. It was all a lie. There was no way they would let them go. The Libyan employees, who had been destroyed by the war and only believed in themselves, chose to escape. They were shot to death, and the few people who were shot were dragged back to the mine staff cafeteria by the illegal militants. They told everyone who was squatting down with their heads in their hands that they would end up badly if they tried to escape. The blood that flowed out had already dried. It looked like countless dark brown snakes were lying on the ground, staring at the ground. It looked as if they would counterattack in the next second. It was a chilling sight. The cafeteria was full of Libyan employees. A black shadow slowly peeked out of the cafeteria window. His gaze quickly swept across the cafeteria built with iron sheets. In less than 10 seconds, he bent down again and avoided the gazes that were sweeping toward the window. After a while, the black shadow peeked out again and continued to observe the situation inside. It was not until he confirmed that there were no Chinese employees in the cafeteria that he retreated bit by bit. This was the first peacekeeping soldier to enter the mine. The mine, which had been mined for half a year, was very large. The mined waste was not transported out in time and was piled up in the mine. After entering the mine, the peacekeeping soldier carefully avoided the illegal militants standing in the dark. He used to stand guard in the tall tower, but now he was slowly approaching the 4 areas of the staff cafeteria, dormitory, office area, and living area. After contacting the outside, they had no way to confirm whether the hostages in the cafeteria were Chinese employees, so they took the risk to check again. Now, they could confirm that there were indeed no Chinese employees inside. So where did the Chinese employees go? Li Jinyin and Xia Jinyuan, who had received the latest news, focused on the mine. They suspected that the Chinese employees who were not in the cafeteria were all in the mine. They no longer let the peacekeeping soldier take the risk to check, and the storm commandos were replaced by the scouts. Li Jinyin looked at the time. It was already 10 minutes past 12 in the morning. He pursed his thin lips and said to Xia Jinyuan in a deep voice, "My team will go in first to explore and make arrangements. Let's try to solve it as soon as possible. We are now 32 kilometers away from the mine. It will take about half an hour to arrive. You go in and find the Chinese employees first, and then we will work together to rescue them." Xia Jinyuan sat in the car with a cold look in his eyes, trying to keep in touch with his brothers. Now that he had a better understanding of the strength of the illegal militants who controlled the mine, his heart sank. "How much heavy firepower equipment do you have left?" he asked again, his face turning even darker. "Don't fight them before we arrive. Wait for us to arrive before you act. Heavy firepower equipment." Hearing this, Yi Qian and the water demons silently looked at the rifles in their hands. The only firepower they had was the Type 95 automatic rifle. And then, that was it. Demon King Li finished reporting the equipment in a second. One Type 95 automatic rifle. As the car swayed, Xia Jinyuan waited for about 10 seconds and frowned. "What else?" "That's it. F***CK. Xia Jinyuan furrowed his brows and kicked the partition in the car. "What are you doing here?" "Peacekeeping?" The members of the Storm Assault team did not have much equipment at all. They were all lightly armed and did not even have a single grenade. Other than a rifle and a dagger, they did not have any other weapons that could deal damage. Damn it! They had come to a war-torn country to rescue people, and they were only given these few weapons. Chapter 43:22. Xia Jinyuan's heart was filled with resentment. His face, which was painted with oil, was filled with so much resentment that it could make a child cry. Was he overestimating the strength of the water ghosts? Or was he deliberately tricking them? He cursed a few times, but the water ghosts were not angry. Instead, they persuaded him. "Guns are weapons. There are enough bullets. After we kill a few bastards with grenades on them, won't we have a lethal weapon?" "Q King, calm down, calm down." Just now, the Demon King studied the map of the mine. If the Chinese employees are all gathered in the mine, they're still a little far from where we are now. If we sneak over, it will probably take you the time to rush over. So, there's nothing to worry about. The water ghosts were not angry. Their situation was different at that time. They had boarded Libya as peacekeepers and traveled through the villages. It was against the rules to carry lethal weapons. Moreover, there were no lethal weapons in the peacekeeping camp. Qing Yao had taken a heavy machine gun and hid it in the camp just in case. Xia Jinyuan did not know what mission the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos were carrying out. Seeing that the water ghosts were persuading him instead, he gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. He reminded them again and again, "They have heavy weapons and rocket launchers. You must wait for us to come over." You must stay calm. After that, he gritted his teeth and said to the driver, "Drive faster." They did not have any weapons and dared to rescue the hostages with only a rifle. He wanted to run over and beat the Demon King up. Will AF * King going to die? After thinking for a while, Xia Jinyuan contacted Yi Qian alone. The two of them had shared the same channel for a few hours, but this was the first time they had a private conversation. "Qing Miao, listen. Your equipment can't keep up with theirs. The gap is too big. You have more combat experience abroad than the water ghosts. You must remember not to be rash. They don't dare to touch the Chinese employees now. You just have to remember this. Wait for us to come over, then we will attack together. Do you understand?" He held the hand of the girl who grew up. They had to hold hands for a long, long time. Yi Qian pressed down on his earpiece and replied softly, "Yes." Then he felt that his answer was too concise. Afraid that he would be suspicious, he added, "I know. The Devil King also said that we are here to save people, not to die. I won't fight them head on." "All right, wait for me." Xia Jinyuan heaved a sigh of relief. He was really scared just now. He was afraid that in order to save the hostages, the girl had completely disregarded her personal safety. He clearly knew that the battlefield was ruthless and that life was fragile. He also knew that no one could guarantee that they could come back alive after every battle. He also knew that and was never afraid of sacrificing himself. However, when it came to her, he was still afraid. He was afraid that something would happen to her. He was really, really afraid. Xia Jinyuan, whose eyes were red, stared straight ahead. He wished he could appear beside Yi Qian right now. The fully equipped Snowfield Brigade's special forces were all tensed up. They didn't expect that the water demons would dare to enter the tiger's den with just a rifle. Now, they understood why their boss had immediately asked them to provide support. The speed of the car instantly increased from 60 kilometers per hour to 80 kilometers per hour. The whole car shook even more violently. The Special Forces soldiers sitting at the back couldn't sit still. They kept bouncing up and down, but their butts didn't even touch the ground. Even so, they still felt that it was too slow. They asked their comrades who were driving to go faster. After all, they had good driving skills. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.